to our third retreat, or actually fourth retreat of the year. We, just for those viewing and those in the audience, we do retreats the first of each quarter, and typically the first Monday of each quarter, although the next retreat will be Monday, January 29th, 2018. But the retreats are just an opportunity for us to get together as a board, discuss issues in a little bit greater detail than we would in a work session or a normal meeting. We don't typically have an opportunity built in for public comment, but depending on the item, occasionally we'll have a committee chair or someone that wants to add something. Certainly we'll do that if time and the format allows. So we will go ahead and get started with we have an agenda for items of discussion. Anyone have any preference on which order we go in, or we'll just go in the order that's listed in the agenda? Sound good? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, the first item on the agenda is, and just for, we've got 5 o'clock scheduled as our end time. Doesn't mean we have to go to 5 o'clock if we get through everything sooner, but that is our time frame. All right, the first item is Transportation Committee and the idea of adding residents onto that committee. That is a committee made up of 3 board members. Currently it's Mark, Chris, and Kevin, and there's been some interest in potentially adding residents to that standing committee, so open for discussion.
So I'll go first. I suggested this a couple months ago. I think the Transportation Safety Committee has been having some really great meetings this year. We've been implementing a more frequent meeting process. We've been engaging with the community well. My thought was, speaking from personal experience, and neither myself, Kevin, nor Chris are transportation professionals. We don't have any training in that area. And trying to make the Transportation Safety Committee consistent with the other committees that we have here in town, I think we may be losing an opportunity to potentially tap into some experience that our residents may have. Maybe we have traffic engineers, civil engineers, people who would have some sort of background that could make the committee a better committee. So always looking towards constant improvement. I was thinking we could talk about expanding this committee. Now this committee is unique insofar as we've got 3 board members as opposed to just like a 1 board member liaison. So I do recognize how it's different from OSAC and ProStac and RCAC and Historical Commission and CAPS. So I guess my thinking was to keep the 3 board members, but talk about the possibility of opening it up to resident members as well. And I don't necessarily have a strong opinion on the number of members or whether or not we actually need to have any sort of threshold. But if there's somebody out there in the community who has some experience and they'd like to serve, I certainly wouldn't want to miss that opportunity to kind of tap into that knowledge base.
Okay. Others?
This came up a couple of years ago in First Friday about residents asked, could we be members of a Transportation and Safety Committee? And then nothing ever happened after that. So then when Mark brought it up again, I thought, oh, this is a good idea. The reason it was a good idea for me at the time was that Transportation and Safety in the past wasn't really very active and would meet rarely. So since you and Kevin have come on board, now we have a really active and an engaged Transportation and Safety Committee. Before, like I said, it was a great idea, I thought, because we just never really had the meeting, and then occasionally when they would have the meeting, if a resident would ask a question, it never got resolved. There was no follow-up. But you all are following up now. So I don't know that the need is as strong as it used to be to have residents on there, but I believe the way you do, Mark, that we have a town filled with very professional, very highly qualified residents. And anytime we can add to our volunteer service by having other volunteers from the community participate, I think that's a great thing. I've always been troubled by the fact that we have 3 board members on this Transportation and Safety Committee, but not on any other committee. We barely have one on
Well,
others.
That isn't quite you can give a synopsis of the standing committees of the board, somebody can. I mean, it used to be the budget committee, the
Right,
finance
yeah,
committee.
yeah.
And it used to be some other thing.
Can't think of the third one. But yeah, finance committee used to be a member, 3-member committee, subcommittee of the board, and then it became the entire board.
Board, right.
The whole, yeah.
And
And-
transportation safety.
But that's the only one that now we have that has 3 board members. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just not understanding why it's right. You know, that's what I'm saying is, how come we have only one committee? How did it end up that we have one committee? And it's transportation, which is pretty important to a lot of residents, you know, because they have issues. So, but the difference between a transportation safety committee being half filled with residents versus like a public, Parks and Recreation in open space or another, is that usually what you have at transportation and safety committees are people that have an individual problem. You know, and then, so that's a little bit different than what the other committees are, is that they come and they want to talk about what we're gonna do going forward, but not because if there's a problem. It's how to expand trails and all of that. So I kind of like the idea of having a transportation or traffic committee that's where residents are involved to talk about how do we improve things as we go forward for the entire town. But I also think there's a need to have something for individuals to come with their individual transportation needs and bring that before a body maybe other than the full board. So I don't know if I've made sense there, but you know, it's kind of like a toss-up for me. In the past, 2-3 years ago, I would have said, absolutely, we got to expand this transportation safety committee because it's never meets and it rarely meets and it doesn't follow through and get residents on it. But now you guys are doing such a good job. I sit there and say, well, what are we trying to solve with the transportation safety? Individual needs or more of how do we plan the transportation needs for the entire town?
And I don't mean to suggest that there's anything wrong with the way things are operating currently. You know, I think we've done a good job this year, you know, responding to the Waldona situation with the Castle Peak, with Coal Creek Drive, you know, and having greater community involvement, scheduling more meetings, and I think being a little more, and obviously the board has been receptive to having the transportation issues be at the forefront of our attention, because obviously these are the issues that we hear from residents regularly, and you know, they affect people in their day-to-day lives. My only thought was, is there any way to make this better, and are we losing sight of an opportunity to tap into, you know, a knowledge base that may be there? It may not be there. And I guess my thinking is, I wouldn't necessarily say, let's open this up to the residents with an eye towards just filling seats. I would want to fill seats with, you know, qualified candidates who could actually help the transportation committee do a better job than it's already doing.
What does the T stand for, Matt? I thought it was traffic.
The T? Yeah.
Well,
Well, transportation.
well, but it's not the same. This is how things have morphed. Because it used to be traffic and safety, right? So where there were traffic issues or safety issues, right? Okay, so now the common parlance is it's transportation, so broader in scope than it was before. And, which, if we are really morphing it to that, where we're morphing it to 2 big topics, transportation and safety, you know.
Well, let me add, Dan, though, now we've kind of reinvigorated the planning commission to take over the transportation planning
No,
vision.
We didn't. They, we asked them to accept more responsibility for some of the review
I think that's
processes and
exactly what
stuff.
I said, but in
So,
a different way. You
They
know?
chose, as part of that review process, to bring forth this shelf transportation plan. That doesn't mean that going into the future, that'll be a priority of theirs. I mean, it could
Well,
or
that's,
could not be.
that's what I was gonna say, though, is that They had it when I was on with Clint, and that we approved that transportation vision plan. It's not a plan to implement, it's a vision for a future of transportation. And then, since that time, it's just kind of sat there, and then we started asking about roundabouts on McCaslin and all that kind of stuff, and it says, well, it's in the transportation plan. Okay, well, then they've now come back and taken on the responsibility of that, which is an absolutely appropriate thing, I think, for the planning commission to be responsible for that which they are, the transportation planning. And so then we get to traffic versus transportation. If the planning commission is doing transportation planning, how does that intersect or relate to the traffic and safety committee?
So the TSC on the Town of Superior's website is listed as the Transportation and Safety Committee
Right.
on our website.
I don't think it's always been that. That's what I'm.
That's what it's called now.
Okay.
I'll read some comments from Chris Hansen and Kevin Ryan, who are both on the Transportation and Safety Committee. whichever
TSC.
one, TSC, but can't be here today, and they wanted to make sure their voices were included in the discussion. So from Chris Hansen, I think it should remain a board-only committee and continue with monthly meetings. Make sure we include residents like we've been doing. If the board were to add any residents, I would say make an advisory committee, but I do not think that's the way to go. So that's Chris Hansen. And then Kevin says, I don't want to add a member of the community to TSC at this time. Amongst other reasons, I don't think it's necessary. We have historically struggled with community engagement on some tactical decisions like recycling and park amenities. The existing committee structure is very successful at getting the community involved. At TSC is different. We don't struggle getting the community involved and have been very effective this year at making small and meaningful improvements. Let's keep it for another year unchanged and revisit in 2019. So I tend to agree with both of them. I think it's been very successful in engaging on the items that have come before the group, and the group has really taken those issues and run with them as which may be different than the past. So I think it is working better than it's ever worked, and I would be hesitant to make changes at this time. And it's always open and welcome for residents that do have an interest to come and speak on any issue. So I'm not sure how allowing them to sit up there would necessarily engage them any more than they could if they wanted to come and engage in any meeting anyway.
I'm hearing the concerns, I mean the idea put forth by Mark. I do think it's very effective, having served on it in the past. There are lots of reasons why it's a whole lot more effective. It's because it's meeting regularly, it's well announced, it's topic driven. So I like all that. My concern about throwing a couple of residents on the committee, I think that's only effective as long as they're not on there to advocate for their own problems in their own communities solely, or it becomes sort of an NIMBY driven. So I'm more inclined to keep the way it is as well. Right now it's working, so don't want to really mess with that formula until there's a reason to mess with it. So I'm good with that.
Okay.
I think my only comment, and that's why I always believe in adding members to committees, is it gives you a broader voice of people who are out in the community and listen. I mean, right now, 2 of the 3 Traffic and Safety Committee members live within 2 blocks of each other. So we don't have a broad representation. So that would be the one reason that I would find value in adding some folks, is to get a broader representation of the community. And then, if there are people that have got technical expertise that live in this community, I think there could be some real value. If we've got engineers who can help, or people who are used to thinking about these kinds of things. So I think there's some real value there. It's hard for our trustees to do everything, and so I see some real value to adding some committee members. But it's working well now, but I just think we could be better if we added some additional members.
Okay.
And I'll add to that, and that's what I said, I think, when I first started talking. This TSC in the last year has been the best ever, as far as I occupancy, because it's meeting more regularly. Not saying that you all didn't do things in the past, and you did resolve problems, but it just seems like it's more active and
Agreed.
engaged.
Yeah.
And so then, the need to add other voices isn't as great, because it's been more active and engaging with the community. I think if we're all under the same understanding that transportation planning and resolving issues of transportation within the town falls under the purview of the planning commission, then they can figure out how they want to engage the community in going forward with doing transportation planning, which is where you want to get the ideas from the residents. And then this TSC committee that we currently have, if we're calling that more traffic and safety, then that's where individuals come and try and get something worked out for their little part of the town. And I'd leave it the way it is. At least the three trustees form a broader view, and then they can bring it back for final decisions at the board meeting.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is.
I just wanted to just add,
Okay.
you know, one of the, I'm fine with this decision, and I think it's working, and I just threw it out there as a topic for us to discuss if we can make it better. Obviously, if things change, yeah, maybe revisit it down the road. You know, one thing, and I could see arguing this both ways, you know, traffic issues, transportation issues, those are some of the most like polarizing issues in this community, in any community, right? Because it affects people. If the street that they live on is heavily trafficked, they're gonna have a point of view, and if people travel through an area, they're gonna have a different point of view. So, you know, in light of that is you know, there's a reason to keep that as exclusively within the board's purview, because we're elected to represent the residents.
All of
and
them.
all of them, and if we have to make a tough decision and that ends up being unpopular, they can vote us out of office, versus being a resident who is not necessarily representing all the people.
Mhm.
But on the flip side, having, you know, a broader swath of the public on a committee, you know, I think can, you know, inform the decision that we ultimately will make. And sometimes, you know, the TSC on really important issues is, the recommendation is the board needs to talk about this further.
Right.
Here is just something from a historical standpoint, and Rita sort of got there. When the issues, broad transportation issues, let's say I don't believe the transportation plan emanated from the planning commission the last time. I think it emanated from the board and then went to the planning commission to look at
Yeah.
and approve with any
That's
changes
correct.
to the board. The broad issue of transportation is a board issue. So when the planning commission reviewed it and came up with recommendations, the logical next step was to put those recommendations before the board, right? Because transportation is a broad policy. Traffic, and that's why I asked about the T, traffic is our localized problems within that broad framework of transportation. Those go to TSC. However, having said that, some transportation issues also are localized. So then the board has to decide, does this go to traffic and safety first, or does it stay as a broad board issue? I don't want us to think that everything that has traffic or safety or transportation in it logically flows through TSC. It may or it may not, depending on the direction of the board.
Good points.
Okay.
Okay.
All
Good
right.
discussion, and thanks for bringing that up. I mean, it's always good to revisit these things
Mhm.
and see direction is appropriate, so, okay. All right, final development plan review.
Yeah, this is an idea that staff had as a possibility of making meeting time more efficient for the board and the public, actually. You know, the way I see things going with the final development plan reviews is we start the review, so I try to keep as much off the agenda as I can, knowing that, you know, the board needs time to review these applications. But it's difficult because we have other items that need to be handled as well. And after you get through public comment and board and staff reports and all that, we're typically looking at 8:30. And the last couple of times we've had FDP reviews, we've gone late. So it's just an idea that, we have open Mondays, that we can maybe just have this as the only item and start the meeting at 6, and you guys would have ample time to do review. And, doesn't mean a decision has to be made that night. It could carry over to a future meeting as we've done in the past, but it was just an idea to possibly help with time management in meetings and get other items done on the regular meeting nights.
Are you seeing a kind of an increase coming of FDPs that would kind of change?
There's a couple coming up, but it's not a matter of trying to handle all the FDPs that might be coming forward. It's just a matter of the length of the meetings when FDPs are at the meetings.
Sure. I guess from my perspective, I think we've done pretty good with getting through them as they've come along. We've only had 2 or 3 really late meetings, and so I think they're more the exception than the rule. I spoke with Kevin about this as well, and his feeling was really can't commit to
Right.
blocking every other Monday out, but is certainly open to looking, if we had a unique situation where maybe a special meeting was advisable, then we can look at our calendars. And I think we're probably all in that category. I mean, the 2nd and 4th Mondays, we pretty much know that's where our lives are here, and we're good with that, but I think we've all probably made varying other commitments on those other Monday nights, but depending on availability, we could potentially be here on and off Monday night. So I guess my response is maybe, depending on availability. And I think I don't think you're really asking us to commit to every Monday,
Yeah.
keep it open, so I would guess we're kind of on the same page there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with calling special meetings as the case arises, right? So we've got an FDP or 2 that really merits our attention. We just get too much on our agenda, but just kind of blocking every single Monday kind of in perpetuity is, I think, not the right way to go about addressing this. Because it doesn't seem like we need that. We just need to have flexibility to address, an odd FDP here and there by special session. So let's just do that.
And I would just to follow up on that thought, I think it would almost make more sense to have, if we had an FDP at a regular meeting that went long, then we collectively continue it to a date certain soon after, and maybe that one's on an off Monday, or even an off Tuesday. But that way, it's, we get through the majority of it, but maybe we're not getting to the really key and decision-making points at 1 a.m., which I don't think any of us are thinking clearly at that time. So
Right.
maybe it's you started at a regular meeting, if we get to, if we're clear we're not gonna get finished with it, or we need follow-up things researched or done, or
We don't want to have 15 conditions.
if we've got too many conditions, right,
Because we've said in the past, we don't want more than 3 to 5.
that's a goal.
And
yes.
we've sometimes ended up with 13 to 15 instead of that.
What sort of notice do we need to provide before
It's
a
15
meeting?
days.
15 days?
10 days.
10 days?
But
Is that the case with the continuation of a meeting?
No,
you can set it to the next day if you wanted.
date certain. You just have to,
Yeah, just have to-
date certain.
Okay, so hypothetically, we could do it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
meet the
Anytime
next
that
day.
we can
Yeah.
get together. But I would just want to make a couple comments about FTPs. We talked about this in the past when you and I first came on board 3 years ago. And I don't know if we talked about it since you guys have come on, but here's something that we've all agreed to, that we do not have to complete an FDP in the same night it's brought to us. There's no law that says we have to approve or disapprove that, or vote on that FDP on the night that it's brought to us. And we kind of got into that in the past, in that the previous big developer kept saying, if you don't do this by October 2nd, I'm gonna lose my financing, or I'm gonna lose something, or, Boulder Valley Ice is gonna go away, or all those kind of things. There were always these conditions placed on that, and then we'd sit here and go through excruciating detail all the changes that were made in the FDP. So that's the other thing. If a clean FDP comes in, and I don't know how to define clean FDP other than, that if it's not so significantly different from what we've seen before. And if we have a lot of questions and things that have to be looked at, I don't think we should ever tell anybody that we're going to approve an FDP on the same night it comes forward. If we can get it done in the same night, good. But I don't think there's any law that says we have to do it that night. And then we can move it to 2 weeks hence, which will be our next meeting, or sometimes 3 weeks, depending on which part of the cycle you're in.
Right.
But we could go to a regular, that date certain could be our next regularly scheduled meeting as well. So I think the short answer to this is that let's keep it the way it is, recognizing we don't have to approve the FDPs in the same night that they come before us. And if we need to if we think we want to move it faster, we can do a date certain in between that meeting and the next meeting, or we can move it to the next meeting even.
So, just a couple questions. So right now, typically when we have FDPs on agendas, they end up at the latter part of an agenda, right? So we're getting started on an FDP.
When we're tired.
9:30, 10 o'clock, and then it's midnight, 1 o'clock, and nobody's making good decisions at that point in time. So, it's just a process improvement. It's probably better for us to hold ourselves to that 10:30 cutoff or whatever the previous board agreed to and continue it. But could we move the FDPs earlier in the agendas?
Well, yeah, so that's what I try to do. So, like, for an example, is the last FDP, which was the Parks 1 and 2.
Which is ours.
There, we had stuff on the consent agenda, but the only thing on the regular agenda was the FDP.
Right.
We had one item pulled off the consent, there's some discussion on that. But we had quite a bit of public comment on the disc golf that night, on top of our regular boards and staff reports. So by the time we got to that one regular agenda item, and then we got discussion on that.
But I think that would be considered not a typical FDP, hopefully, because, we had a lot of questions about financing, and we were doing it, we were
Right,
presenting
yeah.
it. It was a little bit of a different kind of an FDP. I think if we think of more of a normal or regular routine FDP, the biggest thing we all have to acknowledge is that we don't have to finish it the same night it's brought before us.
Yeah. But I think the majority of ones that I've been involved with since I've been on the board, we've been on the board, and even prior, most of them do pass the same night, and I think they can if, because we do have to think twice about continuing something to another date, because there's a cost. There's cost in our time, there's staff time and money, and all of those things to kind of get everyone back together. There's a cost in that, so we got to consider that carefully, and if that means us staying an extra half hour or something just to get it done, I would tend to lean towards the let's get it done rather than just continuing it. But I think the idea of starting it in a regular meeting with hopefully as tight of an agenda as possible, and then continuing it depending on the nature of the FDP. If it's something that needs action sooner than 2 or 3 weeks, then we continue to a date certain, pending availability of everybody.
I actually think there's merit to the way it was proposed by Matt. On an as-needed basis, depending on the peculiarities of the particular proposal, if everybody's available, I think the off night makes sense, because these are very important documents by and large. And just trying to fit them within the context of a regular meeting puts a rush on them. And we can't predict the level of public comment in any meeting. On this particular one, we also had the report from the developer, which mushroomed into something else.
Right.
And, but it's unpredictable. So if I'm just talking, if the only thing I have to prepare ahead of a meeting is that FDP, I can give it a great deal of energy and be ready to go with that FDP. If I have to prepare the elements of the rest of the meeting, then, you've got to allocate your time. So for minor FDPs, fit them within the context of a meeting. For major FDPs or FDPs involving the town center that really are I would call them definitional. They're so important that if we don't get them right, you know, then I'd like to see all of our energy be put on an off night.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think there will be some that we know are gonna be really big, and maybe that is worth considering, so I'd certainly be open to that as well.
I don't think we should let it be, fall back into what happens 4 years ago, though, where pretty much every FDP that was coming forward, or every plan that was coming forward from the developer was on a specially scheduled night. I mean, we had 50 hours of special meetings that year of 2013, and I don't think that's appropriate either.
But that wasn't that was an anomalous year in that we specifically asked the off nights, those weren't individual FDPs, that was the PDA, where we.
But then after that, the FTPs were asked to be put on special nights too. So what I'm saying is that our normal scheduled routine process is second and fourth Mondays of the night. You need to schedule your FTP in there. And if there's some reason that we find it's important, not that the developer finds that it's
Right.
important, then because we want to spend more time than we normally would have, and maybe not carry it over 2 nights, then we would schedule it. But I don't think it should be known that, oh yeah, anybody can come in and ask for a special night for an FTP. They have to fit it into the regular schedule.
That is not their decision. It's gotta be
Right.
our decision.
Right.
My only it's really hard for me to give up a lot of, I mean,
Mhm.
You're extra
this last
right.
week has crushed me at
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Because I've lost so much time at work. So if we're gonna do this, you know, my request to be is that we kind of get an unwritten rule that, hey, we'll do this maybe once a quarter unless this is a big deal. But, you know, I just don't have the time to commit that we would do this on a regular basis. So I would prefer, Rita's concept is we go with our regularly scheduled meetings. That's when people know we meet. And if we have to carry over, then we make a decision as a group based on the availability of our calendar. But to all of a sudden have these suckers popping in on Monday nights, I plan other things on Monday nights because I have to plan around.
Mhm.
And then I have other meetings that are not town related. So I know that's my problem, but I would prefer we not.
Well, we don't want to make it your problem. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
become your problem. And
Um,
we all, like, when we do this, we know what meetings have to be here for. And to then start adding them in, because we are all volunteers here, so we have to think
Yeah.
about that too.
And I certainly think about Kevin in particular, because that guy travels a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to all
And
of a
Chris
sudden-
too has been traveling
and
a
Chris
lot
has been
lately.
traveling a lot
Yeah.
too, so, you know, I think it's better if we're all together as a group, and then we plan when we're gonna move
Mhm.
the meeting, because at least then we can all coordinate calendars and say, okay.
And it's
yes.
not a once in a quarter, I'd say it's once a year kind of a thing. I mean, it should be very limited when we'd have to have a special meeting for a special FTP. Okay.
Okay, all right, good discussion. All right, next is citizen survey.
Yeah, so in the budget, we have scheduled a citizen survey to send out to residents, just asking them questions about how they, satisfaction with general operations of the town in parks, public works, safety, those type of things. Question, I guess, for the board from staff is, with some of the potential items coming up in the next year as far as maybe indoor recreation or broadband or whatever it might be, and the potential need to do a survey to determine support for a ballot measure, does the board feel it might be better to delay the citizen survey until a future year, 19 or 20, and focus more on these special topics and surveys we might need to do for those? Or just go ahead and do it this year and not worry too much about,
Well, if we did it this
It's in the
year,
current year budget?
yes,
Okay.
Oh, and 17.
yeah.
Wow.
you'd still include those questions in the
We
survey.
could, they could be incorporated, but they might get lost in all the other questions, you know, whereas if we did something for one specific topic, it would be just that topic, it would be maybe 5 questions or whatever we would need, and it would be a bit more focused.
Personally, I'd be in favor of, I mean, if we're contemplating going to the voters on anything, I think it would be important for us to know how the public feels, right? So we don't waste their time and money going to the ballot on something that's highly unpopular.
Right.
And I think in terms of, satisfaction with town services and things like that, I think we hear about that already, and if there's a problem, typically people come to public comment, they talk to us. And I'm not so certain that, general questions about satisfaction with town services, how really helpful a survey like that is. Whereas should we build a rec center or not, yes or no? Should we build a broadband network, yes or no? And, would you support a tax increase, a sales tax increase or a property tax increase or whatever the questions are gonna be? I think that's timely and a good use of our survey dollars.
If you've got the information, though, to make an informed question, because do you want a rec center? Sure, I want a rec center. Do you want to pay for it? Two different things, and I think we have kind of overdone it in the past with surveys about what do you want? We know what everybody wants, but what will they pay for?
Right.
But in order to get to the what do they pay for, what will they pay for, we've got to develop those, we've got to develop that knowledge and develop those plans. And I just don't know that we've got the plans in place now to ask the question. I agree, I don't think we need to ask, I think we would have heard about town services. If they're not satisfactory, we would hear about that on a regular basis, and I think they're generally good. So I think it is more useful, though, to know how people are feeling about, would you pay for this idea or that idea? But to get to that question, we need to get a little bit further along.
Well, I mean, I think we know some information, right? And it may not necessarily be an exact quote of, what a rec center would cost, based on plans that haven't been designed yet or, built out of municipal fiber. But we've got some information based on the consultant that we hired with Uptown, and obviously that may change if we end up doing something with Louisville down the road if their ballot measure passes. But that's kind of like a cap in a way. Like, would you support $20 million on a rec center, and would you support $10 million on a broadband network? Maybe built with it. And I agree with you. I think we shouldn't do it before we have the information. But I think we're close, and I think we can get that information. But if we're going to do this, we should do it, and we should really focus on it, because I think the idea is that we want to go to the voters in 2018 with one or both of these measures potentially. And what I've heard so far on being on the board for this past year is that these elections come up quickly, and if we're not out ahead of it, we're going to miss the opportunity to go to the voters. And I certainly don't want us to miss the opportunity to go to the voters if we actually want to go to the voters. So.
So this question, though, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This question is, do we do a general service study this year yet? And I would say no, because of all the reasons that you're saying, is that we need to possibly do early in the new year of 2018 other kinds of informational surveys, provide information and ask the question, the follow-up question, how do you feel about this and the cost of these things to you personally, to the voters. So I don't think there's any value at all in doing some kind of a general survey this fall yet in 2017. I think we put our efforts into what we might ask in early 2018, early being the first quarter of 2018, so we can decide if there's something that needs to go forward in the 2018 ballot. Am I saying the same thing that you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think a general
Yeah,
services.
so the answer to this
no.
question is no.
Yeah, specific questions, yes, but let's give more information.
I agree with you, though. I mean, 2018 is going to sneak up on us before we know it. I mean, we'll get through the holidays, and then all of a sudden, we are going to be in kind of scramble mode. It's like, yeah, what's going to go on the ballot, and what else is going to be on the ballot? There's probably going to be a pretty big transportation. We've heard that for several years, but the latest discussions at
Oh, you mean
meetings
the
have been-
national ballot, or the state ballot?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. and
Right.
It could be 3/4 cent to a penny sales tax for statewide transportation. That's
And then
kind
Boulder
of-
County might do something too, might think about doing something for
It's
things.
probably an either or.
Yeah.
But, well, yeah, but they could
affordable housing, they talked about putting a ballot issue on to do something for affordable housing in the county, yeah.
But we need to have everything finalized by August to get on the ballot, so, I mean,
Mhm.
that's not that far away.
So I think.
Yeah, and in the 2018 budget, there's money for going through this process to
Mhm. I think in our next retreat, which is when January, what do you say it was?
29.
The 29th of January, that's where we need to have that first and maybe only thing on the agenda
Right.
on the retreat is what surveys or questions are we gonna ask and what data is needed to ask those questions. Does that fit with everybody? We need to
I feel
have-
like we should be well along the way
Well-
in ascertaining kind of what the questions are actually gonna look like and what the numbers are gonna look like. So, I mean, I think we shouldn't be starting the discussion at that point in time. I think we're
Okay,
almost behind the.
well,
I said finalizing it, that we need to know then what we're gonna ask and how we're gonna ask it. That would mean, well, first of all, are we asking a certain question, in a survey? That's one, and there's multiple questions that are out here. And then how is the data gonna be included in that question, so that everybody knows individually how much they have to pay for different items that would be suggested.
So, Matt, have we done sort of customer satisfaction surveys in the past?
Yes.
Yes.
And how long ago did we do it?
It's an excellent question. I'm looking at Martin.
2012 or 13.
Yeah.
Maybe 2012.
And did we learn anything from that survey that was of particular value that would make you say, yeah, we should do this again because it's been 5 years?
I don't think there were any particular policy questions that were focused in that particular
Okay.
survey at that time. It was
Yeah.
really just like Matt mentioned,
General
general services.
Okay,
and
yeah, I
how
just
happy
wanted to
folks
make
are
sure
with
there wasn't
Yeah.
something that
services at the time.
bubbled up to the top.
Maybe
that
you
made
could
you
send
feel,
that out again.
Send
feel
it
that
out to
that was
us,
the
the
thing
results?
to do. And then the other comment I wanted to make is I have a very deep concern about the way we do surveys in this town. When we did an indoor survey several years ago, we ended up adding in some questions that talked about outdoor services. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes we made when we did that survey.
Yep.
And, because, now people are misinformed that it was a recreation survey, and it was not. It was an indoor survey, but they continue to reference it back. So my comment is, I don't disagree that we're gonna be doing surveys on some very critical topics. But man, I do not want us to screw it up again
Mhm.
by doing it too fast and trying to do too many things in one survey.
That was an
And-
assistant trustee, and the rest of us should
And
have said
I'm
no.
not laying any
Right.
fault or
Yeah,
blame.
but that's
I'm
what
just
happened.
saying that has come back to haunt us, and it continues to haunt us today. And so I really want to make sure that when we do a survey, that we realize we can't do everything in a single survey. And sometimes it may require one or two, because you can't, putting broadband in with forest fires may not be the right thing to do. I mean, I'm just.
That's right, no.
Well, I don't want to.
And I don't
because
think I'm saying,
sometimes
I'm not
they're
suggesting we do one survey, I'm suggesting we do multiple
Yeah,
ones
that
depending on
it's
the
not an
question.
either or, and I know we get concerned about burning people up with surveys,
Mhm.
but if people have a passion on the topic, they will engage on it. And we
Mhm.
found with the indoor survey, people had a passion for indoor. Unfortunately, we now have jumped to the conclusion that it said more than indoor.
Well,
than
I
it
think,
did
I think if, I
So I
think.
just want to make sure that if we indeed are gonna, I'm okay one way or the other with the customer satisfaction, but I don't want to see us saying, we gotta do this in January, and start thinking about it in December, and
Mhm.
not do it well, because we really need to think through this and not waste effort doing things badly.
I think that's a really good point, but I think we can design this in a single survey and just say, listen, the town of Superior is, contemplating ballot initiatives in the 2018 general election on the topics of building a rec center and building a municipal broadband network. And then formulate questions.
Cool.
or whatever, but I mean, you know,
The
I
fact that
think.
you think it's easy
Yeah.
shows you don't do that many surveys, because
I
it's
think.
not that easy.
I'm not saying it's easy. I think we can design it in a manner that is simple, straightforward, uncomplicated. I agree with the mayor that, you know, we need to make sure that we have a firm grasp on at least, you know, the maximum of what this would cost.
I mean, a ballot is.
Has to be big.
Well, a ballot is essentially a survey,
Mhm.
and it's got everything on it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's what we're getting at is, Sandy, I see your point. I
Well,
want
I-
to make it clean, but I also think you do kind of capture people's attention on a limited amount, and I think, well, if it's well done, it probably should be something to just get
I want to
the pulse.
have us think about this survey being a whole different thing. The last one, we largely drove, and it was a long survey, involved quite a bit of commitment to get to the bottom of the survey, to finish it, et cetera, et cetera. On this issue of two particular ballot matters, I really would like us to research and possibly utilize the same firms that Louisville did. They are experts, these companies, in actually pre-vetting the population to see what a successful methodology might look like, whether or not both can be on the same ballot, or whether or not they'd be self-defeating. And they do most of this simply by over the phone calls to a statistically valid sampling of the population. So rather than us viewing this as somewhat like that written recreation survey or the old-time surveys that we did here, this is the time to get the professionals in here to help us figure out the steps in the process and the highest probability of success. And success to me is accurately measuring the population. It isn't necessarily a yes vote or a no vote. It's accurately measuring the sentiment of our community. So they know how to do it. I've done a lot of survey creation and a lot of survey execution, and I'm out of date on it. I would rely on the people who've just done this with a similar demographic that we have. You know, let's see what they have to say. And it does take a long time to figure this out, and time is of the essence, as Mark said. So this is not a new thing I'm saying. I've probably said it for the past year, and if the rest of the board wants to go down this path, staff needs to be instructed to get in touch with their peers in Louisville, figure out who these companies are, see whether, and bring back to the board as soon as possible, check with us, see if this is the way we want to go. Because there's going to be a cost involved in that, right?
Mhm.
So I say, let's get on it now, because the 2018 election is fast approaching.
Okay. Okay.
Can I add something about the customer survey? Just general survey. We send out water bills to people every month, and they have to look at it, see how much it is, and there's usually other things written on there. And I know it's not the best way, but to get some general view, you could ask a question.
Yeah, we have in the past.
Yeah, you have in the past, and we used to do that at US West when I had responsibility for the customer bill and went out to millions of customers. And you ask them a question. In the case of US West, you couldn't get it answered back and recorded as well, but you all could actually, if you wanted to, ask a general question and have people rate it, because you have to
But you
fill.
can't use the water bills.
Can't use a water bill to ask that question? You
Because
put other-
anybody that lives in the summit at Rock Creek will never see it.
Okay, well.
And
this-
I think most of our townhouse communities and our apartment complexes, it's paid in euros, so you'd have to probably use the recreation.
Oh,
Or
isn't
you
that
know,
the same? That's on my water bill, so.
Yeah, see, for us, like.
Okay, I'm just
Rock Creek,
making
yeah,
a suggestion that a
Use
lot of
use
people.
town mailings.
It's
to
a
get
town
stuff.
mailing, and it's not a statistically
I
valid.
never read my water bill.
But you have to,
It's just auto-paid.
You just.
you ought to pay,
pay.
that's fine too. And if you want to get some general information, you get a sample of a number of people, because it's not that they try to go, well, anyway, I'm just saying that it is a possibility if you want to get information back just generally ask a question about services, you could do that. Because I fill mine out every time. I don't auto pay it, I fill it out, fill it in and hand it off. So,
But
just.
they
an
know
idea.
how many do and don't,
Right, right.
so staff can,
Even if you send out to the ones that do actually pay by paper, there'd be a huge sample, I'm sure.
but staff can churn that and see,
Mhm, okay.
and come up with a conclusion on that.
I wouldn't pay someone else to create a survey to go out this year yet and
You
ask a
could
general
probably do
question.
something in SurveyMonkey and,
Right, you could do
Just
something on the
gives-
website even.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Town board goals. So we've gotten in our packets the draft 2018 goals, and we've got some of the top priorities that we discussed earlier this year in the memo as well.
I want to make sure, and this may be me who did this, when this was on a previous agenda, I did not give it top of mind consideration that it's later been treated with. Several times this year, it's been said that was not one of the top goals. And frankly, I thought we sort of casually arrived at these, at a retreat. So if in fact, we're going to look at top board goals and have them be somewhat rigid, and I think we need to think of it more broadly than they're here. For example, I want everybody to be aware that 2018 is a very substantial, significant year for Jefferson Parkway. By the end of 2018, they have to meet certain targets to qualify for $100 million in money. So they're getting very serious, and that's why there are more meetings and everything going on right now. And, that's why the letters that Tim Gablehouse dealt with are flying back and forth. So I have to throw Jefferson Parkway out there. And we as a town haven't discussed as a town since the new board came on, what perceptions are about Jefferson Parkway. At a minimum, if it goes forth as currently planned, there are going to be significant implications potentially for the town of Superior and McCaslin, noise along 128, possibly shortened runways over at Rocky Mountain Airport that could influence safety, air safety issues over the town of Superior. And to me, that becomes a major top thing that we have to discuss to see how we all feel about it, right? And then tying into all that is there are major Rocky Flats issues coming forth too. The Greenway connection through Rocky Flats, which Tim and I met with David Lucas last week during our budget meetings, and they're planning, the current plan is a huge impact on Rocky Flats, so that Greenway connection. And next year, Rocky Flats is intended to dig dirt for the visitor center. So you have Rocky Flats issues coming up. And of course, TOP, to me, also is successfully having created and then having installed and having the major roundabout finished out here. The art installed and the roundabout finished, so that's a top priority. And then for those of us who attended the Affordable Housing Summit, which was just exceptionally well done, and I have to say, raised the spectrum among this Superior trustee that there possibly is more this town can do, and certainly there are implications on the town of both doing something in affordable housing, and there are implications if we choose not to participate with the rest of the county in doing something. So this has got to be put on goals somewhere, top or other, I don't know right now, but I would have really liked to have had you there. We had very good participation but this is, it isn't as easy as I'd like to have made it. You know, in the past, my personal opinion was we are the affordable housing for Boulder County. And I have to admit, that's maybe a little simplistic. I think there are a lot of potential implications for us doing it or not doing it. So I throw those out.
I'd very much like to reiterate what Sandy said about Jefferson Parkway. It's not something that I've been particularly engaged about, but having attended the meeting the other night, I'm very concerned about, should that road go through, what it's gonna mean to McCaslin. It's certainly not gonna mean a slowing down of any traffic on McCaslin, and it's fairly obvious that they're ignoring the impact that it'll have on Boulder County if that road goes through. Because people are gonna jump on that road, then they're gonna jump off, or they're gonna go down McCaslin, or they're gonna go down 93, so, I think I think we do need to have a position on that. I was personally almost a little bit embarrassed that when we attended the Affordable Housing Summit, that we didn't really even have any sort of a position whatsoever as the town of Superior.
I'm sorry.
We didn't really have a position one
On
way
which
at all on the topic of affordable housing. And in the 10 months I've been on the board, we've never even talked about it. It's obviously a huge issue for Boulder and for other parts of the county, and it was, for me, it just felt like this is something we really do need to talk about as a board and have a position. I mean, it's okay to have a position where we say, we're not gonna do anything, you know, but I believe we need to talk about it as a team and actually have a position, because I couldn't really say anything. You know, we don't have a lot of parcels of land here left to develop, but at the same time, I know I've been somebody who's certainly been advocating for housing that is more amenable to seniors, and that would certainly be affordable, and it needs to be one level, and we don't have a position on that. We say it to developers. So I feel very strongly that in those 2018 down board goals, we need to have even grappled with it before then, because Boulder County is asking us to pass a resolution in January on the topic of affordable housing. And the draft document they gave was relatively innocuous. It didn't say anything. I mean,
Right.
basically it was a crock of sort of nice to feel goods. But if we're gonna sign a resolution, then let's actually talk about this. Let's have a little bit of engagement and actually adopt it to be what we believe it to be, because we might just say, hey, you know what? Right now, we're focused on building our downtown, and affordable housing is not at the top of our, but we support the county goals or something. I mean, whatever it happens to be, but I don't think we can put our heads in the sand, because we got nothing affordable coming into Superior right now. I mean,
Well,
so,
can I add to that?
Yeah.
We do have affordable housing in Superior as defined by Boulder County, because there are houses, I just saw one again on Saturday, it went for $243,000 or something like that. But I hear what you're saying, you know, for the bigger goal for the whole county, that all the new houses that are being built, they want 300 new houses each year to be built at an affordable price. That's in the county, that's countywide. And they want 800 houses every year for the next so many years to be acquired to be part of the affordable housing program. So in Boulder County as a whole, they're looking for 1,100 homes, 300 new and 800 acquired each year to be added to the affordable housing program that Boulder County Housing Authority would help manage, or the towns could help manage on their own. Now, that's not a huge number, but it is a huge, well, we'd have to say how much percentage of that 1,100 homes each year would be applied to Superior, because we're very small in relation to all the other communities within Boulder County. And then it's also 30% of your income applied toward housing. And in Boulder County, the mean average income is pretty high. So 30% of a pretty high number. And then they had different levels, you know, if you're making only 30,000 versus $60,000 versus $100,000, you know, how many percentage of people and how much of that income is applied to that. So this is a long answer to yes, I think we need to restate our position, because we have talked about this in the past, probably not since, you know, you guys have been here, but we have talked about this. First of all, we have no land, and that's the first thing that came up in my group that I was in, is that in order to provide affordable housing for new homes, you have to have land available to put into the Boulder County Affordable Housing Management of, you know, of new. We have no land identified or available to the town of Superior or to Boulder County Open Space, affordable housing at the moment that they can use to build affordable houses on. If we could acquire some land at a reasonable price so that they could build on, and that's a big if, because we can't even buy appropriately costed land to do more open space. But if a developer was willing to allow their land to go at a reasonable price so that affordable housing could be built on that, then maybe we could do that. But we're really down to no land left. The Superior Town Center is going to do it because they're already selling the developer land to builders. Builders are not interested in putting up a $250,000 affordable house when they can sell them for $650,000 to $1 million. So we're at a different cycle here from that perspective. We do have one chunk of land, but that would be the RTD site over by the BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit. But we're out of that. We don't own that land either. We can continue to press RTD to get together with Boulder County Housing Authority, which is what we talked about that on Friday, is, can't think of the guy now, the tall, thin guy from Boulder County Housing Authority. He sat at our table the last week. Frank. And said, okay, and you know, Frank, you need to get together and start pushing this with RTD and with the developer. Because Clint and I tried.
We worked that for 2 years. I mean,
Yeah.
we spent a lot of time on that. But I agree with Sandy. I think it probably would be a good topic for a work session or something for the board to revisit positions, because the prior position, my impression coming onto the board was affordable, low income, no way, no how. That seemed to be the impression of prior boards. Is it this one? We need to check in, because they're.
But that was to buy land to provide, or let
Well,
people buy the land. And we couldn't buy the land as a town. And so Boulder County Housing Authority would have come in at that time.
There's lots of different ways this could or couldn't happen. So I think it would be worth a work session to
I agree.
flesh those ideas
Clint,
out.
your interpretation, I think, is correct, because that, I'm speaking for myself, it just was a non-issue.
A non-starter?
Yeah, we accommodated the Boulder County people to come talk, and then we, on the other things.
Yeah.
And frankly, I almost didn't attend this summit because of that same attitude, right? I thought, got a couple of people going, and it's only when I only thought one was going, I thought, well, as consortium of cities, because I'm the liaison, you know, I'm gonna make time and go. And actually, it was a very valuable meeting to see this in a different context. And I happened to be sitting at this table with such talent at the table who, you know, were really valuable to the discussion at my particular table. So one of them was Frank Guy, and what I'd like, I think some background work is going to have to be done to figure out, I use it numerous times, I'm going to say it again, ways to skin this cat. Because as I told my table, you should have come to us 5 years ago or 6, before we passed the PDA authorizing these 1,400 homes, because now it's too late. We can't go and make part of that affordable. When I went, oh, but you can. Oh, really, we can? I didn't know that.
But only if the builders agree to it.
Right, but anyway,
There's a lot of ifs in here.
And oh, by the way,
And buts.
you know, Zaharias and Anderson and whatnot. But I'm not saying we want to. But then Matt joined us, and I was quizzing Matt on this, and Matt had some ideas, and I'm like, oh, really? So I'm one of them who gave it short shrift. And I think we do need to have a work session, but in preparation for the work session, I'd like staff actually to put forth the different ideas out there, possibly meeting with this Frank guy. I'd like to meet with him again if you do. And then there are a couple of other guys at my table. Young guy from
Boulder.
Longmont.
And Boulder too.
Well, I had everybody at my table. I mean, I had Boulder, Longmont, Lafayette, Louisville, us. I think they deliberately
Split
did
around,
this.
yeah.
But I thought his name was Roger from Longmont. I'm gonna look him up. Roger's a 34-year-old who's looking at the whole housing thing in a whole generationally different way than I'm looking at it. I told him, I want to meet with you because he's looking at it, I have to say, very innovative. So anyway, there's lots more to be had on this discussion. I don't know if we want to do this. I don't know if we can.
I
which
think
is
we
why-
can,
yeah.
but it's really more for the acquisition of properties in Superior. You know, the 800 that they want to acquire and keep, within the communities. They're actually talking about acquiring 800 properties every year in
I thought it was
Boulder County.
500 and 300, but it may be.
No, it's 300, 800. I got the document in
This
my
goal
bag right
requires securing 800 homes per year for 15 years. I thought 300 were new and 500. But anyway, your point. Matt, would you mind going into the Boulder Daily Camera yesterday, looking for Dave Krieger on the op-ed page? He writes an article exactly on what Rita's talking about. He is tying it to land acquisition, and then he ties it to Boulder County's expenditures and Boulder's expenditures for open space. When they're going in on this Mayhofer property with Louisville, that means that money comes out of their budget. And if and that land comes out of production, right? And I meant to send it to the whole board. The way he's looking at this it was a really high quality op-ed that the whole board would benefit from seeing.
You're right, it was 500 and 300 for 12%. If you want to go up to 15%, then you're getting up to the 300 and 700, which is a few more houses, yeah.
Okay, so I think one of the best meetings that we had all year was the April retreat, where we actually all went around the table and identified our top 5 individual goals. Because these town board goals, I think they're great, they're very aspirational in nature, but the problem that I had with them then and I have with them now, and I'm afraid I will have with them going on into the future, is that they're not really actionable, they're not measurable. They're just kind of broad aspirational goals that we should increase economic stability and resident engagement, and those things are all good, but how exactly are we going to do that? So I like the idea of putting Jefferson Parkway on our list of things to keep top of mind. I think it's really important that we as a board have the discussion, talk about affordable housing, and figure out what the position is of the board going forward. My goals still remain, let's figure out something with broadband, particularly after Louisville has their election. I'm assuming that it's going to pass. So I would like us to work with Louisville to see if there's some way for us to do a shared network between the municipalities. I think figuring out something on the rec center is a top goal. Building the commercial core in town center and encouraging the developer to do that remains a top goal. Parks 1 and 2 are still top of my list. And then I think, in light of Buffalo Wild Wings closing up, I think we need to really start focusing in on the vacancies that are emerging in the marketplace.
And those are objectives actually under these goals, so, I mean, that
Yeah,
have to be,
and,
because it says as, through action objectives, I think that's where we have to be very
Right.
more
And
precise.
so, I'm fine, you know, in theory with how the board goals are laid out and all that, but when it really comes down to, you know, how we're gonna measure ourselves
Mhm.
and direct staff to put the requisite focus on these goals, you know, I'm all for simplification. And,
Mhm.
you know, this is specifically what I think should take our focus and take staff's focus, and so that's my recommendation. I think Jefferson Parkway is a good one to put on there. I think affordable housing is a good one for us to put on, for us to at least, you know, reach a decision as to, you know, how we feel about it. But in terms of actually like addressing these goals, I think it was really a great use of a retreat when we went around the table and everybody, because we didn't know where we were gonna all land out, but at the end of that meeting, I think we shared 3 or 4 of those
Yes.
same goals.
Yes.
Which to me was really
But do it
illuminating.
maybe for the January 29th meeting.
Yeah.
No, I think let's do it in a work session before the end of the
Oh.
year. Can we do
So
it in a
is
work
the-
session?
So is the thought to keep this list the way it is for purposes of putting it on the wall, and then you're saying drill down individually and put these other bullet points underneath it, but maybe have them on a secondary
I
list?
mean,
or-
my thinking is, I never look at that wall, right? And I never think about that, you know, I think broadly about those concepts, but that's not the document that I'm coming back to prioritize
Right.
things that I think need
Mhm.
our attention. I come back to my list of 5 bullets that, okay, these are the top priorities. They're simple, and, you know, I think that they will get lost if we're putting them up on the wall.
So do away with this thing on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we do away with it, but I mean, my whole thing is that if we are putting together a list of goals, and the purpose of this list of goals is to actually give direction, that is not the most effective document to do so. It's kind of like just an aspirational document that says what it says, but, you know, what we actually really want to get done are specific, identifiable, measurable goals, which is for the board to address what its position is on affordable housing, for the board to address and do everything we can to either support or oppose Jefferson Parkway, for the board to partner with Louisville on a build-out of a rec center, for us to come to a conclusion on Parks 1 and 2. And those are specific, concrete, measurable goals, which are easy to grasp, and I think we can keep our focus on them. And if they're just captured within a document that's on the wall, it's easy to get kind of lost in.
Okay, so to that end, can we each have our ideas and send them to Matt, and he can collect them and put them?
Then I can schedule discussion at a work session, or,
But I think rather than creating that list at a work session, I think that's some homework that we can all do
Mhm.
to send
Mhm.
him
Yeah.
things, and that way we go
Yeah.
into the meeting with some bullet points already there, and maybe we take some out, maybe we move
Right.
some around, and kind of finalize it there. Rather, I don't like these meetings where we draft things. I think we come up with an idea, we kind of work on it and get it to a
Mhm. Right.
semi-final point, but then we fine tune it at that meeting, and then we're done. And not have to completely write it at that
Right.
time.
Well, you know, when we did it the last time,
Mhm.
right after you guys were first on, or maybe it was earlier this year, it was good. We put down our 5, was it, or 3 top items, and then we
Top 5,
came up
yeah.
with a list of how many, 5 or something, that was good. And, you know, that's the other thing too, we love to be able to have these objectives rather than just a goal, because then we can
Mhm.
hold him accountable to something.
Well,
There used to be never anything that we'd hold staff accountable to, directly, you know, specific measurable goals.
Right. Well,
Objectives.
And you can also check things off. I mean,
Right.
some of these
You can
things
feel
will
good.
some of these things will get done, some will get resolved other ways, but
Right.
they will get,
Right.
it's a fluid list. Things come on, things go off.
And I just thought it was really, really helpful for us to all go around
Mhm.
doing our own prioritization of it, because it helped us see, you know, where we
Mhm.
actually all were on the same page on certain things and where there was a divergence on others. But, you know, that to me was just, it was really helpful. And I think it actually changed how the board operated the latter half of the year, because we all kind of had a focus on certain things, so.
So let's make that an annual April, or maybe.
I think we should make that a January.
Let's make it a
Right.
January.
January
function.
thing. this is the
Okay.
beginning of the year, and these are the things that we want to get
So, yeah,
accomplished
between-
this year.
And we have in this thing, we have some things that are actually more like objectives or not necessarily goals for the town. They're more specific, identified, because these been hanging on for years. You know, like the last one, I'm not against support environmental sustainability, but is that like, is that?
But how do you do that?
Yeah, how do you do that? And isn't that part of the quality of life and, you know, in keeping superior, rather than a separate goal? You know, and I think we could consolidate some of these bigger goals, even into probably one statement.
You know, it's 1 year, we may decide as a board, we want to convert all the town vehicles to electric vehicles and have electronic charging
Mhm.
stations on, you know, every
Right,
public road, you know,
Mhm.
something like that. That's a way of effectuating that goal, but it's a measurable, actual way to implement it as well, so.
right, I agree with you. And that's why it always says here, by the following action objectives. But what I'm saying is that that was a kind of a tag on. It didn't have as much weight as all the other ones, like keeping the financial health of the community, keep maintaining public safety and enhance the quality of life. Those are big goals that we all should be focused on, and then under them, the action. But then this support environmental sustainability, I'm thinking that, I've always thought of that as part of one of the other goals and not necessarily a specific one by itself. But
Okay.
I think that's a great, we should do just what we did and maybe even do better at it this time, like we did.
Okay, so let's have, each of us has our homework assignments and map your suggestions, and then we will reconvene at the January retreat. And
I just sent you all the editorial.
good.
The editorial on what?
Affordable housing.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry, you went back to that, okay,
Are
thank
we
you.
good to move on to semi-trucks?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Semi-truck parking regulations, this was requested for discussion, actually, there's a retreat or two prior, but you had to bump it just due to space. And Kendra wrote a memo on this. This came to me in the form of an email from a resident who had some issues with the semi-truck parking. This was a Rock Creek issue. But the understanding is that we do something, it's gotta be town-wide and not just Rock Creek, and gotta think through how that would, how that would work. I've not heard anything about that particular case since. I mean, generally, I think there's probably not enough purpose in semi-trucks in Rock Creek in particular, but at the same time, is it that big of an issue that we need to address this through?
And Martin might have some perspective from a code enforcement, and then Sergeant Chamberlain, if you have questions for either of them.
There was just a random experience. There was somebody who was parking just the front part of the semi in their driveway in Rock Creek for a while. I don't know if that's happening anymore, but down the street on Torrey's Peak. I don't know if once it's on your driveway, if that then becomes an HOA problem versus a town problem. I imagine it would be.
Martin, why don't you go on? Do you want to join the table here?
And Jim?
Come on.
Okay, yeah, let's get them all up there, the ones that know.
Yeah, I was gonna say before, while they're settling in, I mean, we tend to get a lot of complaints about it up around where I live, on Rock Creek Circle, because there's a lot of commercial vehicles that are parked on Rock Creek Circle, a lot.
But they're not just semi-trucks, right?
Yeah, they're not just semi-trucks, and when I went and read the definition that was in code, I was like, oh, good grief, these guys are doing it all the time, because they pull away and they come back to the same place, or it's within however, what the block was or whatever it was, and so I think that it kind of all ties together, and for me, it was just more of a, I get a lot of complaints about commercial vehicles on Rock Creek Circle, and so just sort of the whole general commercial vehicles in town, I think, is just something to talk about.
Yep. So Martin, maybe give us the latest from
Sure,
code
I guess
enforcement
the,
perspective.
like you've heard from staff in the past, this is an ongoing issue, and there are some folks who know staff schedule and know that they can manipulate our schedule, like the schedule that you see that was also mentioned in the cover memo from the town manager, that folks have 5 days before a repeat visit and reinspection happens. If if there is an obstruction, if there's something that's in a driveway, or close to a stop sign, or close to an intersection, Jim and his staff will step in and address it as a safety item and not necessarily as a code item. But there are several areas around town that have this as a regular item, and the item that you mentioned before, Mayor, about the specific instance, the specific citizen, I think, that was writing me, and also I think the town manager, as well as probably other board members, that particular instance has subsided because the person who is the offender there no longer has a truck driving job. But it's not that it's gonna go away, it's just, that particular instance has subsided.
Okay. From your perspective, is an ordinance change needed, or do you feel like the ordinances that we've got now are sufficient in dealing with the level of issues that you're seeing?
I guess that's a double-edged question. You know, the board established the policy many years ago, and staff's done what we can to enforce it. At some point, it might make sense as a policy decision to step back and think it does make sense to make a change. If you're asking for a staff recommendation, we work really hard to work within the policy that the board has established. If I could wave a magic wand, you know, I'd like to think it was possible to make a policy change and then to affect a change by having the staff to make it a reality. But there's a lot of layers to that policy question.
Okay.
So what would you like to see changed? I thought I heard you just say you would be in favor of a ordinance change, policy change. and
My
then-
own personal opinion?
Yeah.
I hear about it from enough people that it seems to be the kind of thing that the majority of folks in town would like to see changed, that people couldn't park commercial vehicles in a neighborhood.
Mhm. At all? No time at all? Just, not like this 5 days, I think that's kind of excessive for myself.
And Martin said commercial, he didn't say semi-truck.
Well, that's, in this letter from Kendra, it talks about trailers and semi-trucks and all kinds of commercial vehicles, so.
There's a very specific definition in there, and I think the item that you're referring to, Sandy, is the panel trucks that park regularly on Rock Creek Circle. There are folks here that have jobs that require them to use commercial trucks. And it's something that our code allows. And I've had that conversation, I'm sure, just like Jim has with a lot of residents here. It's something that's allowed now, and until such time as there is a change, that is the box that we work within.
So where would we propose they park them?
Can't bring them home?
Leave them
I'm
at
not
work?
saying they, one way or the other, but I know in another community I was in, you were not allowed to have a commercial vehicle in that community at all.
There's a stonemason
Which is
on
hard.
Torrey's Peak who periodically gets complaints from HOA. I mean, this is his
Personal
business.
business,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so if we proceed down this path, this is definitely a public notification that we're contemplating a rule change, and so that we have good debate on it before we take any action. Because I've got a feeling the people whose livelihoods are dependent on those trucks are gonna have a whole different viewpoint.
Some of that does,
On
I'm
this.
sorry, quite to interrupt,
That's
but just
fine.
like you mentioned, Sandy, there are a number of folks who bring home trucks, landscape trucks, the stonemason you're thinking of. There are a number of folks who have business vehicles that advertise the name of their company on the vehicle itself. And that's always been something that I've gotten calls about in the past, but it's something that's really typical, I think. Maybe it's a societal change, just the way our communities change. There are a lot of people who have either home-based businesses or have trucks that they use to advertise their particular business. But it's that definition of a work truck. If it has a trailer, or if it's a semi, or if it's a panel truck, and having a really clear line of what's okay to have at home.
My understanding is for tax purposes, if you want that to be able to expense that, you've got to have your business on the outside of it.
Yeah, that makes
So it's a deeper issue. So I just say, we think we got a lot of complaint by the Heartstrong people over the disc golf thing. Let's not surprise anybody by doing this without making the public aware it's on the table.
And Jim and I talked about this before the meeting today. And I think what we talked about was
Semi-trucks.
the big.
The big trucks, I don't think there's any
semi-truck.
place for those in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
They're an obstruction. a line of sight obstruction for when people are crossing roads or driving down the road. And some of the box trucks, the smaller trucks, they're not as much of an issue, but I don't think the semi trucks have any place being parked in a residential neighborhood, other than unless they're doing business, someone's moving or something.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would support amending the ordinance, I mean, just now to get rid of the semi-trucks completely. I mean,
The tractor and trailer portions both.
no, I mean, Frank, I mean, I don't think that a big diesel semi should be parked in front of a residence.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, to
'Cause-
her
Yeah,
tractor
yes
and
to my
trailer
question.
thing.
Both the tractor, which is
Yeah,
the
yeah, the
front,
tractor
and
and
the trailer, which is the back end.
I heard the or, so.
Yeah, no, tractor
Yeah,
and
so,
trailer.
yeah, so I'd get rid of both of them, and then, you
Mhm.
know, with the box trucks, you know, frankly, I think that probably doesn't belong in a residential area either. The stonemason, you know, those commercial vehicles, a van, something like that, doesn't really bother me as much, that doesn't seem like it's as much of a disturbance. But, you know, I'd appreciate hearing from the public and seeing, you know, what they think.
What
because-
about the 37-foot RVs?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really need to
Yeah.
listen to the community because, you know, I happen to speak for the people who live on Rock Creek Circle, and they used to just see cars, and now
Yeah.
they see a string of commercial vehicles. You know, there was, in one day, there was a box truck, I don't remember what the box truck was. There were 2 Planet Hockey vans, and then there was another commercial, and they're just like, this is ridiculous. We look at our front door, and we see all these commercial vehicles. And so, that's why I want to hear from the public, because one person's semi-truck might be another one. Hey, all of a sudden, I mean, you wouldn't want a bunch of commercial vehicles sitting across from you either. So I think it's bigger than semis, and we really should listen to the public about how would we deal with this, because it's, I mean, in the summit of Rock Creek, you're not allowed to park a commercial vehicle, period.
Mhm.
So people who have commercial vehicles, they gotta park them somewhere else and go pick up their car. You know, take their personal vehicle to get there, because
That's
now.
probably a lot of what's
And I
being parked
think
out on,
that's-
that's what's being parked.
Well,
on
not
Rock Creek
the,
Circle.
not the stuff that's out in front of, I mean, we know they're not, they're not residents.
Yeah.
But, I don't think that's unusual in many communities. I mean, we don't have on-street parking, so that's part of the dilemma. But
Right.
I just think we need to ask the community, because I hear about it probably once a month.
Yeah.
And I say, well, there are no rules against it, but maybe there are people who would like to see rules against it, so.
And what does the HOA do about those kind of commercial vehicles parked on the street?
Nothing on the roadway.
Nothing,
HOA is
as long as it's
responsible
on
for
the roadways,
driveways and
it's only if it's sticking out into something or
If they're in their driveway or
in
on
their
their
driveway.
lawn,
Yeah.
then the HOA has responsibility for
I just always have had a problem with residential communities being a place that people bring home their work vehicles and park them in front of the house. If they don't have a place to park them inside their garage, or they can't fit them in there, then they have no place in a residential community. But I know that's not the rule we have now, but I would prefer that rule. I think it would be a real pain to try and put it in place at this time. But, you know, there's a lot of great big honking pickup trucks too that people use for their work. Yeah, they might be their personal trucks, but they'll stick out past in the driveways you don't pass onto the sidewalk, so then they park them on the street, and they're really wider than what's allowed or provided for a car to park, you know, and so they're bigger than a standard parking space. I don't know how to solve it, but I just don't like the idea I don't like that people can park their cars for extended lengths of time, days even, or overnight, and you fill the street up with commercial or work-related trucks. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
I think
So-
we need an ordinance change.
What?
I think we need an ordinance change.
Do you think
Yeah.
you'd be okay with, I mean, I would be okay with it, but do you think it would be appropriate for Superior to say, not only no semi-trucks, tractors and trailers, but no commercial vehicles?
Well, yeah, because, I mean, this was one of the topics that came up when we had the concept plan for, I think it was Thrive, when we were talking about the parking issues that they were gonna have in town center and how that would work with commercial vehicles and things like that, so.
Yeah.
You know, why, it seems like we've got enough complaints about it, there are ongoing complaints. It seems like uniformly, the residents don't want it, the only people who will want it are the people who park their vehicles there.
I think we've got two issues. We've got the safety issues that are posed by causing line of sight problems and clearance issues. We've got those, and then we've got a visual nuisance. And I think they're two very different things. I mean, I kind of have a no tolerance with something that's causing a safety concern, but I'm gonna be really hesitant before I would support an ordinance that restricts a resident's commercial ability to bring a commercial vehicle. I mean, there's the sheriff's office that brings patrol cars home. Some people don't like cop cars. We heard about that, about town hall expansion. You know, so are we gonna ban cop cars? Are we gonna ban, fire pickup trucks? Are we gonna, no, I think we have to respect that people have vehicles at their house for various reasons. Maybe they're on call for something. Maybe they don't have headquarters where they can leave their vehicle. Maybe they drive, or, their job is to drive around and service bulldozers. And so, they've got to have a vehicle at the ready. So I think we've got to respect that people got to live somewhere, and people got to have a vehicle to do their work. And is it more of a visual or safety concern? And yes, there are probably communities where people can move and things become are totally controlled visually. And I mean, HOAs are sort of like that, but we've got a little bit of HOA, but we've also got a town, so it's kind of a balance for people. So I'm going to be.
And I wasn't suggesting that we adopt some sort of draconian commercial vehicle prohibition. Personally, I don't think that it's the town's place to limit on a visual, like, aesthetic thing. Like, I think it needs to be a safety issue. I think the semis, the box vans, those are safety issues. To the extent that the HOA wanted to impose whatever the HOA wants to impose, that's fine for the people who live within the jurisdiction of the HOA. But I do think that this is an ongoing problem, and it merits a reasonable ordinance, because people know what the ordinance is now. They are playing the 5-day game,
Right.
and then they're moving their car
So
slightly.
it's a 5-day game, is 5 days in our ordinance?
Yes.
Yeah, and we may play with that, especially if we do the full-time code enforcement. We might change that
And
5-day.
is that also for cars that?
No.
No,
Inoperable?
no, well, no.
Is that-
There's no timeline for cars,
As long as it's.
as long as they
licensed.
have a license, yeah.
But they're inoperable.
Well,
Mine's
how do you know if
appears
they're operable or inoperable?
Appears operable. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
they can't
and
be
then
missing several
Tires?
Right.
Well, that would be a problem, yeah.
Okay.
We're missing the
But
tires.
I mean,
'cause someone
I
took
think
them
we
off.
hear, and you probably hear a fair amount about cars that are, unsightly. It's just junker cars that, maybe it is licensed, but they're clearly not using it on a regular basis. It's just kind of there because they.
Comes back to what Mark mentioned about being an aesthetic concern versus
Yes.
a safety
Yeah.
concern.
Yes.
So, you can't, to me, we can't view as equal semi-trucks and panel. Semi-trucks are a total different thing. I mean, that's a dump truck, right?
Mhm.
And a panel truck is potentially a totally different matter depending on the size of the panel truck, right? Some of them are huge. So it then goes to how many axles or whatever the measurement of those are. So maybe it goes to axles, right? And we don't say semi, we say, how many axles does a semi-truck have? I don't know.
Depends on the truck. At least 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
On the
so
tractor itself.
maybe that becomes the distinction. And plus, running into a semi-truck is deadly. Running into a panel truck of a certain size is gonna be harmful, but maybe not deadly, depending on the size. So I think it needs more consideration, but please, no matter what we do, we gotta open this up, because even those semi-truck drivers need to be able to come and give us their take on the issue.
Well,
So
what
should
about
this
that?
be the next TSC topic that the
I
board
think-
wants us to kind of take up as a
Yeah, I
first
think so.
track, and then we can kind of come back to the board with a recommendation, or does the board just want to start addressing it right away?
What, I'd like to hear more though about, to the extent that semi-trucks are causing code and or sheriff headaches
Are they?
versus
So
everything
We've had some that are
else.
parked on streets and people call in and complain about them, but under the current ordinance, they can sit there for 5 days. They are kind of unsightly, it does make it harder to make it down the road, but by ordinance, it's not illegal for them to be parked there.
I mean,
You
given
could
you-
call it an obstruction, but not really, because the ordinance actually states a semi-truck can be parked here for 5 days, so if the ordinance allows it, how can you call it an obstruction when it's already allowed by law? And then if we go over on like 76th Street, people park them over there, and that's a whole different ordinance, but they leave them running, and so there's some other issues with that. So box trucks aren't so much, people complain about box trucks when they're parked near corners just because of visibility, not so much of the size of the truck taking up so much of their road. And that's a different issue that we can address when it happens.
But in a given year, semi-truck issues,
We probably do
5 to
what,
10,
5 to 10 in a year.
Yeah, probably doesn't. There's probably a few you don't hear about, probably a few I don't hear about
Yeah.
that go to you. So yeah, I guess in order of magnitude, it would be probably RVs, the most common, and then after that would be the commercial trucks and the panel trucks, and then after that would be the semi-trucks, the most frequent.
And there are gonna be some times when an RV or a moving van's gonna have to park overnight, you know, on the street and things like that, but those would be the exceptions rather than, you know, if someone came to visit and parked their RV overnight at someone's house, you know, they can do that.
For 5 days.
Yeah, up to 5 days now, but I mean, if we had it where you can't park anything bigger than this big, you know, there, that might keep somebody from parking there at
but
all.
I mean, on semi, I mean, on, just to drill down a little further on the semi-truck thing, I mean, these 10 or dozen or so that you've got, I mean, are they wanting to stay more than 5 days? Or are they just, you're getting a call on them maybe after day 2? I mean, just given how much those things cost and they're probably better making more money out on the road than parked in Rock Creek, I'm just wondering, are we trying to solve a problem that just doesn't exist to
Is a
a
dump
big
truck
enough
a
degree?
semi-truck?
No.
No.
Okay, just answer the question.
No, but that's a good question. You know, construction vehicles or other kind of large building vehicles, builder vehicles or things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think a residential place should be a home to commercial business vehicles of any kind. But, however, we have a problem that Rock Creek has been here for, and, you know, Rock Creek particularly is what we're kind of talking about right now, has been here for 20-some years now, and we've always allowed it. So to go back and take something away from somebody that they've had is gonna be very difficult. And I know other communities in other towns around here, you can go down their street, I can go to my one friend over in Westminster at night, you know, after 6 o'clock at night, you can't even get down their street because it's so packed full of pickup trucks and commercial vans and things that people need to go to work the next morning. So they're only there at night. Then they go in the next morning and they go to work. And you can't go in after the fact, after somebody's been doing it for 25 years. I think semi-trucks is a little different thing, but you can't do it about commercial, you know, trucks. I remember the days a long, long time ago when I was at US West, we tried to start having service technicians at US West garage their vans, service vans at home, because they could head right out to the job instead of having to come into the garage in Denver or wherever, you know, in our 14th state territory. And I go up to Loveland all the time and I see the Loveland police are around my daughter and son-in-law's house. I mean, Loveland and Fort Collins, they leave their cars parked there on the street. Now, nobody cares. They like that because it makes it safer for their community. But, you know, where do we stop? That's the other question. I would like to say nothing, but I know we can't do that anymore here. It's too late.
Yeah.
We can say something, but we have to be very precise what it is that we're saying no to.
Okay, so what's the pulse of everyone? I'm kind of leaning towards not doing anything, just because I don't think we realistically can do anything beyond semis. And I'm just, I'm not totally convinced that there's enough of a semi-problem.
Or we could shorten the
They-
time.
Yeah, that's what I think we
I
should
mean,
do.
right now, we've got this 5-day window, and, I mean, I know a lot of people will game that on, with RVs. They'll leave RVs out there for a long time, because unlike semis, they're just using them on the weekends or something like
Right.
that, and they don't wanna take
And
it
I'm
back to
not-
the storage
yeah,
unit.
I'm not that concerned about that, but, so I mean, are you saying shorten the time frame on semi-trucks?
No, I'm saying, you know, potentially shorten it on everything.
Anything.
Yeah,
On
you know,
everything.
right now, if the ordinance says 5 days, you know, now we
Yeah.
consider moving it to
2.
2, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like that. I mean, I think even for RVs, you're getting ready for a camping trip, you're coming back from a camping trip, weekends involved. I just think that's getting it's getting too restrictive. So I wouldn't be, I understand people don't like it and people will call about it, but I think we will get more calls from, I think we'll get more people coming out of the woodwork about taking something away from them than people will be appreciative that, oh, you know, I don't have to look at that for, you know, an extra day or two.
I always thought it was 3 days, so I'm surprised that it's 5 days. So I'd be in favor of reducing it to some 2 or 3 at the
Here's
most.
what it says in Kendra's memo. It's unlawful to continuously park any trailer, semi-trailer, or utility trailer for more than 5 days on any public street.
Mhm.
Is there another reference in here to 5 days regarding a vehicle?
No, no,
Other
this
than a
has nothing to
trailer?
do with vehicles, it's
That's
only
it.
talking
This
about.
trailer?
There's
What
a-
is a trailer, though? What is a trailer? Is it just the trailer part of a, here it's semi-trailer, but what does it mean by trailer or utility trailer?
Could be a box trailer, could be a camper trailer. Same
But
thing.
does it have the
Trailer.
engine attached like
Could
a
be a
box
No,
truck?
a trailer is just a trailer, not attached to a vehicle.
But if Sandy's box truck example, like somebody delivers, I don't know, Frito-Lay in a box truck,
That's not a trailer.
that's not a trailer.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I'd like to see the number of days shortened. I mean, the most we allow a car to sit in the same parking space in the Summit is 72 hours. And that's, you know, that's a car.
Right.
But I would also like to see us limit large vehicles. I understand vans, not so
They have to
bad.
be moved.
But
yeah.
big trucks, tractor, you know, I don't want a dump truck parked in front of my house, whatever it would be. I would like to see us, whether there's a way we could somehow limit continual parking by large vehicles. You know, I don't know whether we can or not, but I do see more of it than I used to see, of larger vehicles on the streets, and I think it's particularly dangerous in some of our narrower
Yeah.
streets, so, you know, van, okay, maybe I don't like the planter hockey truck, but it's not dangerous,
Right.
you know, so.
But I mean, your point about the dump truck though, I mean, whatever we do has got to do town-wide.
Yeah.
There are some dump trucks in the immediate vicinity here that park in residential
Well, I'm
areas.
just saying, I think
But if
we
they
should look
park on
at
their
it.
own property, that's okay, but if they can't park for if the proposal would be that they can't park on the street
Yeah.
for more than a certain number of hours.
Yeah.
I mean, days, not hours. You said hours, but really.
No, I just think is there a way we can look at it? Because they're oversized vehicles, and so for me, they
Right.
become a safety issue. It's on your own lot, not much I can do about it. But
Right.
if it's in a public street, because it narrows the street passage, I would.
And it takes up more space than what's allotted for a parked car.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
it does.
Oh, sure.
And therein lies a public safety problem right there, you know, it's bigger than the allotted space. So I think we should move it back to the TSC group.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like us to look at, I mean, in
Look at
Brookfield,
it.
you can't do it in Broomfield, and that's why there's a big old lot right there on the side of 36 where you store your
Mhm.
RVs and things like that, so.
It's a business, yeah. Well, I'd certainly be interested in looking at
Yeah.
what other communities are doing. Yeah, be consistent with other communities. I mean, we don't want to become a parking lot because we've got the most lax rules in the region for parking things. But and I think we need to also strike a balance with what our code enforcement's dealing with. But I really, I'm going to be real cautious before making it more difficult for people that are just trying to kind of go about life. And to your
And-
point of, hey, you've been here for 20 years, done this for 20 years, and now
Left
you're,
my-
now you're
yeah.
hassling me.
Left my,
Um,
my
Yeah.
work vehicle on the street forever. And now you, yeah, that's the thing that I think if we're starting new, from the beginning, you could restrict things,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
you
just,
can't
I
go
mean,
back.
think of holiday weekends, and, you know, how would this, you know, would you make a Christmas week exemption? You know, somebody's off for a week, and, you know,
Mhm.
they wanna have their, so I just, I don't know, it seems like
However-
we could kinda get
Yeah, I
tangled
agree.
up.
I don't see a clear path forward, so if TSC wants to take this on and maybe figure out some path, I'm all for it, but I think Rita's exactly right. We are going to be shocked at the congestion of parking in the Superior Town Center. It's going to be
Well, I think
nasty.
Sandy mentioned that or somebody, but
Yes.
that's.
Or Sandy, whoever.
Whoever, or I don't know, maybe Mark did too, but
Metro districts.
that's there,
That's the
and
Metro
we bring it up
district's job.
every single time we talk about that.
Yeah, but when
that-
they don't have a place to put those cars, they're gonna end up on the streets in the town of Superior.
Yeah.
And in Rock Creek,
Right,
so.
right.
Yeah, it's.
Let
a
me ask another question about
big deal.
parking, which I've noticed recently, that, and I'm sure you, Jim, look at this, or your officers do, but I walked pretty early and pretty late over the weekend, did my usual walk, and I see cars parked in some of the parking lots of the parks, and I don't know why they're there, you know, because I can't find people in the park. So I don't know if they're, do you ever check that? Do you think?
There
you're-
are some people that park
Leave their cars parked
There are
there?
some people, yeah, park over there, there's a couple of trucks that park over there,
Yeah,
and I think it's just that space.
Right,
They don't have
right.
Space
They-
by their house, so they park it there and
right, that's what
walk home.
I figured out this weekend, is that I saw a couple cars that never seemed to move out of a couple of different parking lots. You know, why are they still here? You know, where are the people? I mean, you know, you might park there and go on a trail or something, but I thought that, and I don't know, do we care about that,
It
or
was
do
an
we?
easy thing, you just put a sign at the park end that says no overnight parking.
And overnight parking.
Which we, you know, right now, I don't think there's anything like that there, we might wanna
All
consider
all
that.
county parks are like that.
Yeah,
Overnight parking.
because I think I've been seeing a lot of cars that are there late and early in the morning that didn't seem to
Yeah,
move. It
yeah.
might not be a big problem, but, you know, I
It's
think.
probably something you don't want to become a habit. And
Right.
And become okay by default. So
Mhm.
I would, yeah, I think that's reasonable.
It also seems like that would, you know, you make yourself open up to vandalism. And, you know, if there's a
Right,
car
because-
that's just parked in
Yeah.
the middle of Purple Park parking lot every weekend, and
A lot of times it's right beside other residential houses, so it's not, you know, it's not like it's in a high crime area. But if it's worth it, I don't know if it's worth it, but just put up a sign, if it's worth it to buy the signs that say no overnight parking, it might be something we should do. Because you've seen it too,
Now,
Jim?
Rita, would you rather have it be in that spot, or would you rather have it be on the curb in front of the house?
I don't care where, what, who, what, the
The car.
car? But this is only, so you got half a dozen parking lots throughout town, and it's not gonna be where the problems are for the people.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
just-
it's like, well, are we like Walmart, where you can come and park your?
I don't think you can, I think it's.
No overnight.
No,
parking, go
no,
to
Walmart, you can park your trailers and your
I can go put my
motorhomes there.
RV there
Yeah, you can park your.
without permission?
Absolutely, they, in
Lot of-
any
lot of
Walmart
Walmarts
or
are set up
Sam's
that way.
Club
Some
in the
of them have
country, you
dump
can
stations.
overnight park your
Because if you're coming there, you're gonna
RV.
shop.
Are you looking at me like you never heard this before?
I had not heard this.
Oh, no, no, no,
I don't have an RV, so I've
everybody,
never looked at it.
everybody has an RV, knows. Anywhere
but I
you
never
can
will.
park in any Walmart or Sam's Club parking lot. And this Sam's Club over here in Louisville still gets overnight trailer parking because people don't know that it's no longer a Sam's Club, and then now it's a Tipperary church. But people come and they can park there, you can park any overnight.
Okay, well, somebody figure
Okay.
out what to do. I don't know.
So I think that TSC can work with Alex, and we can do the survey of what other communities are doing and just kind of see if Superior is kind of in line with other communities or grossly out of line. And then in
Right.
light of that, make a recommendation to the board whether we need to make a change or not.
And talk with the HOA.
Well, you could
to
just have as a discussion topic at the meeting too, on the parking of non-personal vehicles, and just see what kind of reaction you get. I mean, it might be most people go, who cares?
Yeah, right, that might be.
And then if it's not a topic at all,
Mhm.
then you just let it go. But it would be interesting to see if we'd have residents show up and talk about commercial vehicles parked near their homes, and whether it's a major issue or a minor issue.
And the HOA might have more of an issue with the Airbnb and others that rent out spaces in their homes, that end up having business, like people rent out for a month or something and then have their business trucks and things in front. But, it's yours. I think that's
Okay.
great.
Good. All right. Library services.
Well, this is partly my topic. I know we've had some discussion about the fact that now we're sending even more money over to Louisville, and so that's an issue. But I have a meeting with the folks from the library later this month, and we're going to talk about how do we get more, they're concerned about how do they get more Superior residents to have library cards. And, obviously I would like to see us have more Superior residents have library cards. But as we had an email from a resident, are there services that we would like to push the library to bring to our community? Once a year, we have the discussion on the book over here, but, and we'll have some other things, but it was more of I'm gonna have a meeting with them. Do we have thoughts and ideas on what we would like to see? They're like everybody else, they got a limited staff, but are there areas of concern that we would like to see more done here? And do we have ideas of what we should do? I'm hoping to convene, just say, hey, come to Starbucks one day and let's just talk about library services just with citizens, but I'm not sure anybody's got any ideas on that either, so.
Maybe they could open a library branch over here.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, in order to do that, you have to have space to do that, and you have to have the money to pay for it. And
That's what that 1.5 mils is for.
That's right, we're already paying them the money.
But
So where we
so
need
then
is
the
the
other
space,
question
yeah.
becomes, if we're paying them the money, do we want to put some strings on that money? Right now, we pay them the money.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if we absolutely want them to do something over here,
I think to the extent that we can get them to do more programming over here, I think the book review is a good event. I think the children's reading activities are always popular.
Mhm.
They do those at the library.
Right.
We don't do those so much anymore, but those are always
Mhm.
a popular thing. I think our Youth Leadership Council's kind of taken that same idea on in the summer.
Right.
And I think it's kind of hit and miss depending on the timing and everything, but I'm generally pleased with the way that it's going. I think those that know the services are there, that use the services.
so
I think-
do we want to say to them, hey, we would like you to run a specific activity they put stuff in the rooftop drop to get more people to be, have a library card. But do we really want to say to them, we expect you to plan something in the town of Superior on a quarterly basis and to really give us a report back of services?
Let me help you out with an idea. I don't know if they even do this anymore, but at one point they had been trying this concept where high school age kids ran a technology service to help non-tech savvy people learn how to use their phones and their iPads and their computers and all that kind of stuff. And they certainly could run that at town hall once a month. Another thing would be, since children's books are the predominant thing that's checked out, could we actually asked them to create, to bring several racks, some significant quantity of children's books, some significant selection, and bring that over here so our folks don't have to go down there. But that brings with it a host of problems, like how do you check out the books and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that would work or not. Third thing is they dispose of old books frequently. If you go over there, they always have 7 or 8 stacks of children's and adults' books that they dispose of. They charge like $1 or something for them, but they certainly could.
Well, the Library Foundation actually does that. It's
Well,
not the library, but.
But they could provide some of that over here or whatnot.
So just a quick on, so our youth leadership group took some of these tasks on because we weren't actually getting a lot of reciprocal feedback from Louisville, which is how our project started with the kids. So maybe if there's a different set of players or a different, set of people in place. I mean, I know that our kids kind of picked it up because we asked them to a couple years back after not getting anywhere.
Right.
So just to kind of keep that in mind.
Can we better utilize RTD, the Cullen Ride, to actually provide more of a shuttle of kids to the library and back home, like on a once-a-week basis, to be able to participate? They've got that great youth area, teen area, to where actually, kids and their parents can plan on shuttle back and forth. But of course, that's a peak time
Right.
when the call-in ride is already pre-booked.
But didn't we expand the call-in ride territory to take in the library? Yeah. So you have where you can call
You
for a ride.
individually, but I mean to
Yeah.
actually make it sort of a little bit
Yeah,
of
they
an after-school
probably won't want to
activity.
do the RTD wouldn't want to do that to where they have a regular path, but.
But if it's one meeting place,
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Sandy, they came to Chili Fest. Do they routinely come to Chili Fest and?
They've never come to any of our events before.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were next door to me
Right.
at the Chili Fest, and they got a steady stream, and they brought microscopes, and they let everyone know that they can check out microscopes. Now my kids want to go check out microscopes at the library, so. I think-
GoPro cameras and all kinds of things
Yeah,
that you can check
so
out.
I think that was a good move, and I think that would be something to say to them, make that a regular thing, because the more exposure you can get to residents just in a casual atmosphere at our festivals. So I would say definitely Chili Fest, definitely 4th of July.
Skate with Santa, couldn't they do something over there too, Well, just an
Yeah.
example that I mean, I'm not saying,
There's
yeah,
really not any
absolutely.
booths- There's not any booth space at that, but I guess anything.
Well, they
maybe-
could create a booth space
Maybe
over
tie
there.
in with the chamber and
Yeah.
any event where there's booth space involved, and
Mhm.
definitely those 2 big events, and possibly others,
Mhm.
would be good to have them present.
So generally, we feel that they need to just have a greater presence.
Yes.
Right.
Which is what I've been trying to tell them, but I wanted to get
Mhm.
a
Yes.
sense from you
Yeah.
guys whether you believe that they should
Yes.
try to be doing more activities.
Well, and if
over
you
there.
got them to go, if you were instrumental in getting them to go to Chili Fest, good job, because I
Right.
think that was a very good
Yeah,
move.
I mean, I think Daryl actually brought the idea up initially because she said, you're members of the chamber,
Mhm.
so you get a booth, you get a
Yep.
space.
Yep, no, that was,
And,
that was great.
so then they
That was
went,
great.
oh.
I didn't know they were members of the chamber.
They just joined.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
They joined so that they could access because we recommended they use the rooftop drop to get information out about the library in a cost-effective way. And
Mhm.
so they joined then, and then, Daryl said, well, you do get a booth for free at Chili Fest, so.
That makes me think too, that the chamber does a resident welcome pack to all new residents to Superior, and they should definitely have a flyer in there. Hi, welcome to Superior, by the way, the library's over there.
Mhm.
Be sure to check it out. You get a card, because somebody moving here from out of state, they're not gonna know that.
No,
And
they
they
wouldn't,
may or
right.
may not pick up on that, so definitely something in the new resident pack if it's not in there
Okay.
already.
Right.
I don't know if it is, but that would be.
Okay, and that's actually great, because they have, they actually have been doing outreach to real estate agents in the city of Louisville to ask them to put information in the real, when the real estate agents give it out. I did not know the chamber did a new
Chamber does, yeah.
resident pack, and
Yeah. Yeah,
that'll
it's
absolutely be
a
it.
little welcome pack.
I'm sure they.
I think the Bell Flatirons would probably also welcome some kind of outreach efforts as well.
Well, they've tried to get contact with Bell Flatirons, and they've had, I can't remember whether it was Patrick or Martin or Matt gave me some contact information, and they've had very poor response from them, but,
Well,
I know that's a
Yeah.
hot area they really want to reach.
Yeah, well, I've got a good contact over there.
Okay.
And I would think this would be something they would want to,
Okay, if you could send me that,
sure.
that would be awesome.
And if they could just maybe put in their the 2018 work plan to do one other special event here. I mean, they could come in here on a Saturday morning and do something specifically associated with.
Well, that maker space over there is so
I'm wondering if they
cool.
could do a makerspace activity
Activity
over
here.
here.
Over
maybe
here.
at the town center.
If we could publicize it in advance enough, and then, and have it be focused on a particular activity or a set of books, where if you're gonna do something in April during spring break or something for certain age kids and the certain books, and bring them over here, not have to have a full bookcases full of things, but do something here, 1 or 2 times in the year, something special just for us. Now, when I was on the board for a brief time before you went on, and after going on for Deb and Sandy, then I had told them that once we get our community space, civic space in downtown Superior, you're going to be required to come.
Yeah.
You're going to have a traveling exhibit. And the other thing that was there too was the builders throw some money in, like the 1% into the fund in Louisville. It's some kind of a
Like an impact.
impact fee,
Mhm.
and there was $100 and some thousand available left at that time, and I said, buy a mobile library truck, put it up.
A panel truck that they
A panel
park
truck that
here.
we can park right here, we leave it overnight here, no, they would never leave it overnight.
Not more than 5 days.
But those
And
kind of things.
It's a great idea though, because the sides roll up.
Right.
Yeah,
A
there you
pop-up
go.
library truck, I said. They had $110,000 or $150,000 they had to spend by a certain time. They might have already spent it. But you can ask whoever, Heather or somebody
Yeah.
again, because Ashley was trying to get them too, Ashley
There are
Stoltzman.
pop-up library kiosks.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
know.
have, somebody showed us this. You
I-
could have them in
I know.
parks, sort of a bigger time version.
And the people there at the board couldn't wrap their head around how they could do this. That's why it needs to go back to staff, their staff. And Ashley was trying to push it too, Ashley Stoltzman, but, I don't know, I said, boy, if you lose that 100 and some thousand, because it's so many years, and then it goes back to the developer, evidently, the impact fee does. So if you lose that 100 and some $1,000, because you can't come up with an idea of how to expand services of the town of Louisville. I said, how more perfect is this than that?
Sandy, that's important.
They used it on historical stuff.
They did? Well, there's other impact fees. They should go after more, maybe.
So,
Okay.
when you did the reading,
Yes.
But it has
or
to
the
be
build,
on the city of Louisville.
on the St. Page scene, were there many Superior residents there?
They just drive
About
across the highway.
6 or 8,
I don't think that's the,
about the same last year.
Don't
Was it
say
this
no,
one?
just
explanation
say-
was not when they came from.
Okay.
Well, Malcolm was against it, now he's gone, so maybe we can get
Okay,
somebody else.
Okay.
we've got 2 more items, it's 3 o'clock, how are we doing on snacks, anyone want another sandwich? Or
Sandwich.
another round of?
Cookies, maybe I'll have to go get another cookie. No, we'll be done here pretty soon, then. We have any public, any comment on anything so far?
Sandy, community engagement, is that her topic?
Yeah, let's, all right, we'll keep plowing ahead here.
Well, we had hoped, and I had gone over and met with the folks at the golf, Fairways Golf. Well, let's put it this way. Initially, we're gonna try and have it at Brunelleschi's, and then it was recommended to me that that was not the right place to do it because it's loud, and it's not really so somebody then got the recommendation that we look into Fairways Golf. So I went over and met with Fairways Golf. The plan was to try and do it so that we would get a different group of people than the people who come to every single thing that we do. They're all great people who give us opinions, but we wanted to try and engage a different group of people. So the thought was to do it at Fairways, to try and do it on a Sunday afternoon when there was not a football conflict, because we would lose a lot of.
Bye week coming up.
Well, the bye week, and then we actually looked at the October 15th as a potential to do it. Unfortunately, it's October now. So the opportunity to promote this is now crapped out. But anyway, Patrick and I went and met with the folks at Fairways, and we had a tentative agenda plan to do it on the 15th. Then when our consultant talked with the other owner, he said, absolutely not. You cannot do it on a Sunday afternoon. So at that point, I just went, okay, well, let's go back to the board and have another engagement. Because what we were trying to do was to promote the sports stable, which is a well-kept secret in our community, and to not only attract additional people, but to have it in sort of an informal way that we could have the community engagement. We might be able to have some sort of a little contest where people could try out Fairways Golf. They could sample some food and beverage, and we could also have an activity for children so that the parents could come and the kids could experience the sports stable. We didn't want to do it on a school night because then you can't get the kids there. It would tend to be the same people because people who have school children couldn't come. So the plan sort of now has fallen apart, but what I was hoping that we would be able to do in that engagement is to give some preliminary thoughts on the indoor recreation space. And now I think it might be a little premature because I would like to recommend that when we talk about it, we not just talk about indoor space at the sports stable, but we talk about our whole civic space in the Superior Town Center. So, you know, I think we can get Fairways Golf on a weeknight. I think it sort of defeats the purpose at that point to do what I had as a vision for our quarterly community engagement. It's not as time sensitive. I would like to see us, if we're going to talk about sports stable, possible indoor rec, I would rather see us talk about the whole thought process of civic space, which Kevin's not here, but I think he would agree with me that I don't think we can plan sports stable without talking about the rest of the space. So at this point, it's kind of up in the air. I think we can get Fairways during the week if we want it. We can. There's not that much going on over there. It would change the sort of what we were going to, what the vision was, and that's okay. But I think it's a little bit premature to have the discussion on the sports stable civic space at this point. So we're kind of up in the air right now. I think if we wanted to pay for this Fairways Golf, we might be able to do it on the 15th, but I'm really concerned about whether we could market it well in less than 2 weeks.
Can I ask a question just for clarification? We've talked over the past couple meetings, civic space has come up a little more, but we haven't actually had it, you know, as an agenda item where we actually discussed it in depth. And you know, I don't necessarily know where the previous board landed on civic space and what everybody's temperature is on what that would look like, and you know, is it a library, is it
How do you define civic space?
Yeah, so I mean,
Then we will tell you.
I guess the question that I have is, would it be wise for us to talk about it first as a board as to what we're thinking and then
We're
go
gonna
out
have some
and
time.
engage.
And that's what I
with
was
We're gonna
trying
have
to say.
some
I may not have
community.
said that very well, because I
Okay.
was, but that
Because I wouldn't
was-
want to necessarily engage the community and then
Agreed.
find out we're just getting, hammered with all these different conflicting
And I-
ideas, and it's
Well,
not
that's why
necessarily
I said
consistent
that
with what we
last
want.
email, was, it feels like now that we're talking about indoor recreation at the sports stable, if we could look at the whole civic space over in that space, it would give us more definition. We
I,
can't just talk about sports stable and not talk
My,
about the other
my
components
attitude
also.
is, before this sports stable concept goes to the public, we as board have to hear about it again. Because if it, it's gonna be dependent, if this is again a subsidy to private vendors in this town, it's gonna be perceived one way, certainly by me. And if it's partnership, it's gonna be perceived a different way. So before I think it's premature to go out to the public before the board weighs in on the shape that might take over at the sports stable. So I'd like to hear it back. I'm not ready to rush that out in front of the public until we churn it. But heck, if we're looking for a topic, obviously the hot topic these days is traffic. And we could, you guys could just have the whole next public session, just the broader issue of traffic and safety considerations in the town of Superior. I mean, because that certainly engendered a lot of discussion. Are you ready for hearing everything from everybody?
So, I guess this is my thinking on these community engagement events. Like traffic issues, transportation issues, we've got a committee designed to address those issues. That is, generally speaking, a reactive committee that addresses complaints that are arising from the community. I don't like the amount of traffic on this street, people are traveling too fast, they're parked too close to the curbs, it's not safe. So we're responding, and we need to respond, I think, in a time-sensitive manner to the concerns that are being raised. These quarterly community engagement meetings, I think, are an opportunity for us to approach things a little more proactively and forward-looking and say, okay, what do you want your town to look like? So, I like the idea of us having a rec center / civic center discussion, and I think that this is exactly the sort of thing that would be perfect for, and it's something that would actually get people there, because people say, yeah, I want to talk about a rec center, yeah, I want to talk about what civic space is going to look like. Are we going to have a library in town? Thinking about what the town's going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's perfect.
I like couching it in those terms, where
Yeah.
you have a broad issue, but I
Right.
don't like it from the perspective of,
I don't think people are going to come to a community engagement event that is focused on, we want to hear your complaints about traffic.
Well, and I think it does have to have a theme as well,
Right.
because if you say, let's come to the community engagement event, like, well, I got 5 other things I've got to do that night, and,
Right.
it's,
Like, I thought the home rule one was a great
Yeah.
event, because
It
it was a
was-
topic that people were curious about. They didn't necessarily know much about it. They knew that we were considering it. It's forward-looking, and it would define how the town would look in the future.
Right.
And we had a really, I think, informative, active discussion with, the mayors from other towns and people
Yeah.
who have been through this process. So I think that that's exactly the sort of thing that a successful event would have. So I think like a rec space, civic space discussion is perfect. I just think we should probably have a conversation first, so,
I agree. I agree. And
we're
get-
going into it with some structure.
Yeah, and have the newer board members kind of get up to, revisit some of the things that we've already
Mhm.
discussed. To get back to Brunelleschi's, I was there for a Realtor event a couple of weeks ago. Now, this was 11:30 to 1:30 on a weekday, and they were not very busy, and they turned down the music, and we had 55, 60 people in the east side, and they turned on the big screen TVs and allowed for PowerPoint, and it was a great space for that. Now, nothing else was happening in the restaurant at the time, and I don't know that that's practical for one of our meetings. I'm thinking the state of Superior address for 2018 that might be a good venue for that. People could order lunch that wanted to or not, don't have to, but. So if there was a time, if there was some kind of night, and I've been in there on some nights where there was just a handful of people, and they probably wouldn't have cared at the bar if you turned down the volume and they could watch their TV, but you had some other event going on over to the side. So if it was a night that they didn't have some major tournament going on in the building, or they didn't have some major event that was drawing people on the TV, then I think it could potentially work over there for as a venue, because but it would have to be done on a night where they saw advantage of bringing people in.
Well, I don't think on the weeknights, it wouldn't be as big an issue with Fairways, because sounds like the issue was trying to do it on a Sunday, so we could do it and Fairways feels very nice and warm and cozy, and I think it's from a perspective of doing it in an environment would be a little just warmer and cozier, like doing it, it's a great place. We just couldn't do it on a month later we found out we couldn't do it on a Sunday, so it kind of busted the plan. So if we wanted to do it during the week, it sounds like we're not ready to use the topic of indoors recreation and civic space, which I didn't think we were ready either, so that's what concerned me. So right now we don't have a topic. We could wait until November. We'll still have to do it on a weeknight, it sounds like. So.
It is nice to have a topic, but then again, it's nice not to have a topic as well. Deborah always used to have a topic for her first Fridays, and we've adopted that more loosey-goosey approach, which bring your own topic, and that is fine. So
I mean, it's pretty much up to you guys. We can do it during the week. We can see if Fairways wants to do it. There's no way I believe we can do it on October 15th at this point. We do a lousy job of but we could move forward with trying to set it up on some night of the week, trying to juggle everybody's calendar.
So I think we made a mistake as a board by calling these quarterly community engagement events, because it artificially sets a time frame for when we're going to have them, and it kind of forces the issue, because if we don't have one, then we've not met a deliverable that we were supposed to actually deliver on. It gives a false expectation to the community.
it wasn't false, it was deliberate.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is,
we actually did it deliberately to force
I
ourselves
understand
to
that,
do
but I
it.
think that was a
Yes.
mistake, because
Yeah.
I think it's great to engage the community, but we need to recognize that time is a finite resource, and people have limited attention
Right.
spans, and they're only going to come to these events if there's a reason for them to come to these events. And I think the first Fridays are great because it gives people ample opportunity to interact with board members as they want to. We were looking at doing this as a way to kind of give people an opportunity to do it in the evenings. But if we're going to be going to the public with a survey on the rec center, on broadband, considering a ballot issue in 2008, I think we should be thinking about this really holistically, and this is kind of a first opportunity for us to informally engage with them before a survey is coming out. So let's not rush this thing now. If it doesn't happen in October, that's fine. If it doesn't happen in November, that's fine as well. If it has to wait till after the holidays, that's fine too. I'd rather do it in a way that it's actually set up to be effective, and okay, this is going to be the rec center civic space discussion. Oh, by the way, keep your eyes peeled for the mailer that's going to be coming out in 2 weeks. Fill out the survey so we have an idea as to whether or not this can actually go to the ballot in 2018, to see if it's something that you want. I think we're actually better representing people, we're actually better engaging with them, and I think it'll be a more successful event.
I agree with you. And the other thing, to add another variable in here, First Fridays doesn't always have to be 7:30 coffee. We could do a First Friday happy hour over Friday happy hour at Brunelleschi's. We can change it up and get a different group, or we could do a First Friday noon, order dinner and order lunch, or have it over at Wayne's or whatever. So we toss that about casually here and there, but we certainly can make it deliberate as we go into 2018, you know, have one coffee, one lunch, one dinner, one coffee,
That's
one
great,
lunch,
yeah.
one
That's
one
great.
happy hour, I mean. So we can mix them up in term.
So all the questions I've been getting lately, and, you know, except for the onesie-twosie kind of things, are all related to when is the Main Street gonna be open and when is the stupid roundabout gonna be done? So, I mean, that's all I get constantly, you know, and we got some of that even at the public meeting. So I wonder if maybe we can have some kind of a current status or update on what's going on with the town center. You know, I don't mean just what Bill does, but from our perspective as a town, how it's developing, is it meeting our vision, you know, and what questions people have about different things. Not in a negative way, but, you know, I just think we could give an update about that too. And people do not believe at all that this roundabout's gonna be done this winter, you know, and they're worried about that. I think it will be, hopefully, if they commit
I think
to
it looks better after our meeting.
But then they're right away the next day, then they close it again, you know, half
Well,
of it.
It looks
rainy.
pretty good now.
It's rainy.
No, they closed down one.
Today?
Not today.
While
but-
they're installing the
Yeah.
the
That's when there's a
conduit
conduit.
for the streetlights, so. yeah.
Well, wouldn't that have been installed?
Well, it's
I agree
Excel,
with
so
Mark.
they-
I don't
they
think we
do
need
it
to
when
force
they're
one.
in
If it doesn't
spring.
feel like it's natural, and it doesn't, then we can't
If we do
coalesce.
what, do what?
They-
Do we need to have a
We don't need to force
quarterly
it right now.
engagement
Yeah.
meeting?
October 13th.
Before next
or
January.
15th is the latest.
It's already October, then we have holidays coming up.
No, I
That
don't.
was Mark's point, is
Right.
let's not rush this just for the sake of
I agree with that.
rushing it.
I don't,
Okay.
I think Sandy can take that one off her back and.
Yeah.
Couldn't we have one that
Figure out
impacts sports
solutions to
anyway,
the
like
Jefferson
someday maybe?
Parkway
Did you look
instead.
at impact sports? They don't want to. No, I don't mean in the grass. I mean out like in a courtyard and the great views of the mountains and things like that. In impact sports, would they be amenable or?
I don't even know where you would do it at. I
On the
mean,
court, on the basketball, pickleball court with the big windows looking out that way. I mean, anyway, just, I think it would be a great space to have a
Some
meeting.
yoga mats.
Yeah, we could have a yoga session or communicate. Well, that takes the pressure
Okay.
off for now.
Yeah.
I
All right.
would like to continue to push us, though, to have the holistic discussion on the recreation space and civic space, because I do not believe we can talk about one without talking about the other.
Patrick.
So I'm gonna keep pushing on this.
What, we talked about having an upcoming meeting. Do you remember which one I,
On
13th?
First meeting in November?
November 13th at the work
Perfect.
session, I think.
For the work session to discuss civic
Talk
as well as
about the
rec.
terms and what they
Indoor
might need.
space and civic space.
We need to allow enough time.
With, yeah, I plan on starting at 5, so,
Okay, yeah.
if that works for everybody.
So that's November 13th?
At
Yeah.
the work session.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
That's,
all right.
I mean, that's what we're planning now, things could change and
Okay.
stuff.
So I'm in trial that day. I will come to the meeting, but I'll probably be late. But just-
Yeah, and I mean, I'd like to see us look at both
We're gonna
spaces,
settle ahead of time.
and I'd like us
This
to
one's not.
also look at the requests from ProStack for indoor recreation space, but I'd also like us to go back and think about the things that were asked for in the indoor survey.
Yeah, well,
Um,
Patrick has that.
So, I mean, I know Patrick has all of it, and I want the whole,
Summary.
Yeah.
because even the ProStack has kind of shaken out on some of the things that were in their original request to say, okay, these were things that we think we need to have, but the sports stable will, everything that they wanted doesn't go in there. So I just want to make sure we have the whole holistic discussion.
Okay. So we got one more item on the agenda here, and if we could get out a little early, that would be fantastic.
Right.
So, committee changes, or process improvement. Any thoughts on?
This is just kind of it was discussed a little bit at the budget meeting.
Right.
But Rita had mentioned maybe committee members being assigned to take notes, or summary notes instead of staff, or things like that. I didn't know if the board wanted to discuss further anything like that. I know Kevin in his email said he went one step further than what I was thinking and said he supported the merging of the two committees, ProStac and OSAC, and I don't know if you want to talk about that here. We're going to do it in the work session, but.
I think let's go with a work session
Okay.
for that discussion, because we could have a discussion, but there's no.
Right,
There's,
yeah.
yeah, that's not
Yeah.
been noticed as
Right.
an
Mhm.
item, so I'd say let's not even.
Well, we
dive
couldn't
into
make a
that.
decision, I agree, about that today, yeah,
Yeah.
at all.
So Matt, go.
So I guess, is there any, so that's scheduled for an upcoming work session, but are there other process or change items?
Well,
that
he
you'd like to
asked
look at?
about, having been involved with various committees over time, it's that link to staff that's critical. It really is. And Rita correctly says that on Historical Commission, they take minutes, but so does Brian. Brian does the official minutes of the Historical Commission, and is her name Karen?
Yeah, Karen Walgore.
She does them, and she reads them every week, but that doesn't make them the official ones.
Well, I've never
Because-
heard that there was anything other than her official ones, so,
The-
and she reads them.
Am
and
I
then-
wrong, or the ones in the
Nope.
packet, Brian?
So the ones that you guys see in the packet are the notes that come from staff.
Okay,
And
so-
OSAC does, I believe OSAC does their own as well, but we've always.
No, I don't think I said that.
Well, I think that's a kind of a double,
They
I
didn't.
didn't realize that. I mean, why would you, because, and actually Karen does an excellent job, very detailed. And then the agenda is very detailed too, about old business, new business, follow-up business and all that.
That was my point, though, the link, if these committees are just residents, and residents reporting the minutes, et cetera, we gotta think how this link with staff works.
Well, the staff would still be there. They
Well,
cannot be
But
there.
staff is the one, and it's why I think the staff liaison is more important than the trustee liaison, is the staff is the resource for so much of these, and then the way the staff couches the minutes, because it's all in the presentation, it matters to me because it's been processed through a staff mind. So I'm not necessarily comfortable having just a committee member do the minutes, because I think the staff is still going to then have to interpret that. So I like the staff being there and the staff doing the official minutes that the board gets.
Well, I think that's way too much. We're adding way too many steps in this process. I mean, it's not like it's an official documentation of the, creation of the country and back in 1765 or something like that. I mean, I just think that's way too much. But, I just was trying to find a way to help out staff, because you're all saying how busy everybody is. And it seems logical requirement, not a requirement, but an operational item to have a member of the committee.
So we have the two staff liaisons here who have borne the brunt. Let's let them opine. I'm happy to concede immediately. What they say will work, I will accept. So, not having heard it, so go ahead, boys, go ahead, men.
I will say that writing the summary notes is the most time, by far the most time consuming.
Okay.
And then how the process works, at least with the committees that we have, is we write them and then we send them back to the committee, because a lot of times they're not very happy with how we communicate what we saw go on. And then we sometimes have to review the video back and forth to make sure that
So what should the
everybody's-
staff, what should go before the board? In your opinion, how should the board receive its information?
I think what typically ends up happening is what goes before the board is what the committee wants you guys to take from their meeting.
So it'd be
So-
better if the committee members wrote the
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah,
Right.
because ProStack, for instance, it'll take me almost a full day to write them, and then more often than not, Peter and Corey will have some level of change because I interpreted something different than how they meant it to be or how they wanted it to be.
So how do we bridge the gap? Let's say they write them like Rita suggested, then how, will we wait till the board comments on them at a board meeting?
No.
No.
They just reverse this
Yeah,
order.
yeah, and
Instead
I-
of him, Patrick writing them, then send them
Yeah.
to Corey and
They send them to
Peter.
staff.
They write them, send them to staff, staff looks at them and says, okay, fine, edit this or do this. We just reverse the order here,
And then
that's
they
what I
come to
propose.
us?
And then come to us, it doesn't
Okay.
come to us until everybody that
And
currently.
we try to sequence them right now.
Right,
That you get them, depending on how the meeting falls or which meeting, we always try to turn them around by the next meeting. So ProStack, you'll almost always get them by the second meeting of the month. OSAC, it depends on where OSAC falls, but I think they'll turn around a little bit quicker. And then we've relied a lot on the video. The videos are there
mhm.
when we need to go back for clarity.
But then you have to go back and spend your time looking at the video, trying to find that exact spot where they were. I just, I've taken lots of minutes over my lifetime on boards of directors of corporations, being the secretary and all that. And someone from that group needs to take the minutes, then have the executive team look at them. And then staff definitely at that same time, they should look at them to make sure that there's nothing that's in conflict with what was heard. But I don't think we should have you guys spending 2 days trying to get minutes put together for a committee. The
If you
committee,
think that will work, I'm just fine with
And I think too, there's a different level of writing amongst even the staff that I have. And they're getting comfortable without them, so I do think it would be helpful to some extent to have the committees have stronger ownership over those notes.
that. But you will still
Yeah, yep.
weigh in, okay.
Yeah, I think that it's gonna depend on whether you have somebody on the committee who actually, A, wants to do it. I know it's incredibly difficult to be the chair of a committee and take minutes. So if
Can't be the
you're-
chair, right.
And it's really hard to even take minutes when you're involved in the discussion. That's why it's always concerned me that Patrick was taking minutes at ProStack, because the poor guy is trying to run slides and do those things. And that's why, part of the reason that I felt like if we were to approve the budget, that the new staff person could go back and read, because when you're engaged in the discussion, it's very hard to understand what's going on. So I would still advocate that if we do approve the budget and they get a committee's chairperson or staff person, that person go back. Because in reality, minutes should not take the details of everything that happens in a meeting. They should take the major decisions that were made, and if there was something significant, but they don't have, the detail of minutes we have at the trustees is a little bit different. But at a committee level, all you really need to have is the decision they made. And, you could just put the agenda in unless they, but we may need the detail. And so I would still advocate that if we approve the position with the budget, that we actually have that staff person go back and prepare the minutes. Because I think it's really hard to be on a committee and take minutes and be adequately engaged. But we may have folks who would be happy to do it, but I know from my own experience, it's not easy
Not
to
have the
do.
trustee liaisons do that.
no, the
Yeah.
trustee liaison can't do it. A committee member has to do it, and then,
I think that's just a rotating position on the committee, that
Right.
somebody volunteers for it, by meeting or by year or whatever.
Can we give it a crack and see how it goes?
I think I'm all with.
I'm okay with that.
I'm all with going with the committees, because I think the idea of having Patrick, you in particular, spending a day on minutes, that's,
yeah, I think
That's
any,
great. That does not-
I don't want to spend any money to get a clerk to record something that's said in these committee meetings. I think that the committee should be responsible for
You mean
recording
the
their
new
own.
staff position?
Yeah, I don't think,
I'm
I
not-
want them
I'm not
doing
feeling good
something
about
more
that myself.
powerful than that. Actually advancing forward the work of the committees, not
Yes.
just writing what they said at a committee meeting.
exactly.
Well, I mean, the purpose
Is that how
of
you
of
feel, Martin?
minutes was, I mean, it predated having audio and visual
Right.
recordings of meetings, right? I mean, that's why you took minutes so you knew what happened and.
Right.
Who was
Yeah.
there?
Now we don't
Yeah.
necessarily need these detailed minutes because you can go back and see for yourself what exactly happened. So, I'm all with what Sandy's saying about having kind of simple, straightforward minutes and,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, opening up staff's time to do more important things.
And if we have to do a
Martin, do
little
you have anything
tutorial
to add?
for committee members who are gonna write minutes of what minutes should look like, I mean, many of us, Sandy, could come in and give that little tutorial, or even the best writers from Patrick's staff could say, okay, here, do it like you said, agenda, what was decided, what
Well,
was
I
discussed,
think
what
come
was
up with
decided.
You guys had mentioned the committee training
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
opportunities, so we pulled several examples, and that seems to be very
More people would
consistent.
be inclined to
Mhm.
do
Right.
it if it is resolved, you know.
And it- and
I do
it's
think though,
actions taken.
with planning commission minutes, that's a little different though,
Right.
because the planning commission,
Quasi
when they're acting at least on applications and you've
Yeah,
got.
those
Right.
continue to do
Yeah,
that.
Be
yeah,
filmed.
so it's gonna be Phyllis, okay, great.
Right, we're just talking about these other
Okay.
resident committees that, yeah.
Can we talk
Okay.
pro-stack and OSAC?
No, we're gonna
Can
do
we
that
go
at a
there?
work session.
We are gonna go there?
I would
Okay.
like to see us have that discussion, a little bit of a preliminary of if we're gonna make this decision, how are we gonna do it? Every time we put it on a work session agenda, it ends up, we don't do anything. So I think we need to sort of say, as a group, if we're gonna make this decision, what sort of information do we need to have in order to make this decision? Because I'm like Kevin, the next time it shows up in a decision, in a meeting where we can make a decision, we need to make a decision and then agree to never talk about this again because this just keeps coming up and we can't seem to get anywhere. So what are the things we need to have available to us? Because if we put those two committee folks in a room, of course they don't want their committee to go
I
away.
think the decision, if we all weighed in, probably largely has been made. What's important to me is how the transition is handled. And because we've got dedicated people on both, and those people have got to be treated respectfully, and the committees have to each feel worth, and that not one is not being usurped into the other. So what's important to me is what the ultimate name becomes. You know, is it the name of one or the other? I would prefer to be, it actually be
The name that includes
The new-
both names now?
New name.
I would like to
Or it
have,
already includes both?
if only a minor change, it should be a new name. Then we have to decide how many members are on it, and then we have to go through the process of figuring out which members are on it. And frankly, it never, it seems like such a logical recommendation, but Kevin's in his email today said everybody reapplies.
Mhm.
And to me, that's the starting point. It's very simplistic. Everybody reapplies, because what you might find is some people might naturally want to drop off anyway because of work commitments or whatever. And if we keep 9 on the committee, and didn't you tell me we're short here, a couple here and short a couple there?
I think we're
Somebody told
down
me.
2 on OSAC right
Yeah,
now.
And we're
two
down one on.
One on ProStar.
Okay, so we're down 3, so now's a good time to have this conversation sooner rather than later. Have them reapply, but we've got to sort of figure out how the ordinances would read
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah,
And,
and
and
what's the-
staff
what are
can
the
write a
people
rough
do?
draft of how
Yeah,
that might.
Kendra's done that already, yeah.
Right, and,
So I guess we don't need it on a work session, we're ready to move forward.
well, no, though, there are some.
No, the
some
same.
prickly
I mean,
issues.
somewhat facetious, but not
I know.
really.
There's some
No, I-
prickly things that
I
need to
agree,
be
but I
addressed.
want you to say that exact same thing in our work session,
Right,
so
I
that
know.
it's out there.
I-
But I would also say that if the magic number's 9 and we've got a combined 10 from, the 2 that wanted to be, I don't want to exclude anybody that, if everybody wants to
Mhm.
be back on it, I think over time it will,
Go back to
it will settle into its normal, its
Mhm.
normal 9.
Right.
And then we move on. But I don't want to have this be a process where we're cutting people that want to be involved or anything like that. This is more about efficiency and getting to decisions more efficiently. and
Without redundancy.
Without redundancy.
Which is, we've had, not on every item, but on a lot of items, we've had a lot of
Yes.
redundancy.
So then are we saying that the work session would be that we have decided we will be eliminating the two committees?
I think we will confirm it in the work
You
session.
know, but I mean, we'll say that that
We'll be
is,
combining.
you know, we're gonna, whatever it is,
Mhm.
but that we're not having a discussion anymore about whether there's two separate committees, that it's one. Now, how do we make this transition and enable the
I
two
think
committees to come in? I'm just
Formally,
trying to
at the work
understand.
session, we can, should there be one committee or twos, that's where you start. And I'm just presuming that that is further down the pike than not. And then we go to the elements that need to be addressed to make that transition
Yeah.
smooth, should we decide to combine.
But are we there?
At the work session, I
don't know.
have a draft resolution for you to review.
And that's in this November work session? Or which work session?
I don't have it scheduled.
Oh,
yet.
I see, okay,
Yeah.
I'm getting my dates.
But can we have it all done so that if we do decide to combine, that they can hit the ground? Because then, now we've got these work plans, we've got the work plan process happening at the
Mhm.
committees right now,
Yeah.
right? And then the work plan's approved in the first meeting of January, right? So it sure would be nice if we could get to this now.
Mhm. And maybe that's where you get back
Yes.
to, we might end up with that you combine the two literally, and if people still have years left on their appointment, we might let them stay on. But I mean, this is, I'm just having a discussion, I'm not making a statement.
I have time at the next meeting.
That's what I was gonna
Monday.
say,
Yeah, but you're-
our
We
agenda.
could have discussion about.
I mean, what is putting it as a regular agenda item?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a
So the
good
next,
idea.
what he's saying, the next meeting is a little bit light as far as the agenda goes. We could just have it as an agenda item instead of a work session. And I might even prefer that, just to allow
Mhm.
better dialogue with public comment, because I do want to allow plenty of public comment on this, and work sessions are kind of tricky,
Yeah.
kind of messy in that regard sometimes with
No, we
public
don't take
comment.
action.
And we don't take action. So
Right.
in a regular meeting, we could take action,
Mhm.
and it's done sooner rather than later, to your point, and we can start then working on work plans, whichever direction. So I haven't made a decision on this, and I think we want to, that's what the purpose of the meeting is for, to get it
Mhm.
out there, let people comment on it, and then we go from there.
Okay, so the plan is for next week's meeting to have this
Yes.
as an agenda item?
Yeah,
Yes,
Okay,
Can you-
where we would actually potentially take action?
potentially, yes.
To decide whether one or two.
right.
Okay.
And can you have a list of the members and when their
Yeah.
appointments expire? Yeah.
And let's make sure to circulate as
Yeah, I'll
soon
have
as
Patrick
possible.
inform
To
the
both
committee.
committees, so
As soon as
they're
possible,
there.
circulate a message to all of them.
That we're
just
gonna
saying
talk about
that-
this.
Just saying that this is up for discussion. Yep, mark your calendars.
Mhm.
Sandy, you as a liaison seem troubled. Do you want to share?
I just don't want us kicking this thing down the road
Oh,
one
okay.
more week. I mean, I want it
agree.
done.
I agree.
Okay,
We just keep bringing it back up.
Are you okay with us
And we
doing next
resurrect
meeting?
this poor little dead horse. I just want us to make a decision and stop leaving these guys in limbo.
Both
They are-
committees are, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
You know, I think both committees will work with it, whatever we decide. You know, they're mature adults as long as we protect, make sure that what we
Treat them
do.
maturely, yeah.
Huh?
We need to treat
You know,
them.
In their
But,
work that they've done.
You know,
Yep.
but they've got some pretty strong opinions on some topics right now, and I think we have to make sure that whatever we do doesn't dilute the passion that they've got on some pretty hot issues right now.
Mhm.
So, I just don't wanna talk about it.
Right. So
We're
Pat-
done.
I was gonna say, I've had conversations within the last 2 weeks with committee members on both sides who are aware that
Mhm.
the discussion is gonna happen at some point, just because we've been talking about it for almost a year, so I don't know that it'll be a huge surprise to anybody.
Okay,
But I can notify them.
Mhm.
good. Anything else?
I would just add, when we were talking about this, well, first I have a question. I wasn't at the last board meeting because I was stuck in a plane in the tarmac. But what was the ultimate outcome of the RCAC? Did you expand there? Did we, remember you talked about that at the last board meeting? Not the last one, two board
Two
meetings
ago.
again, yeah, I'm sorry. What was it, weren't we gonna, they asked to have their scope for
Right.
next year? Wasn't, I can't remember.
They asked about name change, and we said
Yeah.
we were supportive of the idea of a name change. They didn't come forward with a name change, so they're gonna work on that.
Yep.
They were asking about,
Bulk item pickup.
bulk item pickup. We
Right.
said,
But I was talking more about changing their name and expanding to talk not just about
we
recycling,
were,
but
we
also
were the
conservation.
board was in support of that concept.
So we're gonna get a work plan from that committee with a new name and an expanded
Yes.
emphasis on more than just recycling, but
Correct.
on
But
also.
they were also talking about building code issues
yeah, right.
and changes, and I think the board was opposed to
Correct.
any sort of change to the ordinance that would make it more
Right.
onerous on anybody who wanted to build something.
The name of that committee does not have recycling in it, as I understand. I thought it was Resource Conservation Advisory Committee.
Well, that's
I think it's
recycling.
recycling and conservation.
Yeah, it's
Where were all
recycling
these
and
names
cons-
changed?
No.
It's in the-
it
it's in
used
Well,
to
it
be
doesn't,
Resource
I don't care what
Conservation.
people thought it was.
It's the
or anything.
Recycling and Conservation Advisory Committee.
Resource Conservation.
No,
Huh?
recycling and conservation. Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle of the
Oh,
night, somebody
Okay,
got
so
in
then,
there.
Maybe
that's a
I'm
process,
wrong.
that's
Imagine
a
that.
committee process improvement that I think is a positive one, that they
Yes.
want to expand that. And then my last one is just this, I was a little bit disconcerting to see again that planning commission comes up and says, well, we told you that we recommended that you build this roundabout up there, and how come you haven't taken action on that? I think we need to make sure that we're connecting the dots, not that we needed to have taken, because I thought we had explained to them that your transportation plan was just a vision, but not a implementation plan from planning commission, and that the roundabouts had not been approved, and that, the recommendation had to be bigger than just, well, it was in the transportation plan. But I don't know if, I want to make sure that the committees are able to get information that they want the board to consider to the board. And we started that where we're going to give them time, and I want to make sure that that's working properly, that the time that they have to present what they want is going to work or is working properly if
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
any changes. We just started it, so I know
Yeah.
it's pretty early.
I'd just like to make sure maybe at least quarterly,
Right.
we put their recommendations on an agenda, so we do.
Put
that.
them on the agenda
Yeah,
to give us
Put them on the
their.
agenda to actually give us a report.
But they don't always necessarily make
They may-
recommendations,
Right.
right? So
They
like
may
it-
not
it
have
may be-
anything, but that we at least, on a
Have
quarterly
them
basis, have
regularly report.
provided an opportunity
Sure,
for them
sure.
if they need to. And then the other piece that, on this topic that I wanted us to really, it feels like we do not spend a lot of time with their work plans when they present them. A lot of times, they're on the consent agenda. I would really like to see us literally have them come in and present their work plans, because I think part of what got us in trouble this year is we had some generic stuff in the work plans that we let flow through, and what they meant and what we perceived were two different things. So I really think the approval of their work plans is something that should be more than a consent agenda item. That's just my opinion.
Well, we
In
can
the
pull it-
past,
we
it
can
has
pull it
been.
off the consent agenda. if
But
there's
I think
anything.
we just let them blow through,
Well,
and
in
I
the
think we
past-
shouldn't let them go through.
Yeah, and in the past, I've been here when there's been presentations by the committees of their work plan.
But Sandy's right,
Yeah.
typically not. And typically, they just sort of slide through, and I think your suggestion's a good one, because increasingly, that's their law for that year. But let's do that in the context that we fit them in a window of time. These
Yeah.
open-ended presentations.
Yeah,
You get
no, I agree
15
with
minutes
that.
to present the highlights of your
But if they
plan.
put on there, we
Yeah.
want to get a rec center, I want to understand exactly what that means.
Right.
So that we know completely that what they said and what I perceived are the same thing.
Right.
Okay. All right.
I would say option, at their option. If they want to come in and do a presentation, there may be some circumstances where some committees may say, you know, but maybe not, maybe they all would.
Well, that concerns me, because that won't solve the problem of the perception
Yeah,
issues.
right.
But I would like, I think there's merit
Well,
to
another,
having-
to your point, possibly, the advisory committee that happens to have the first dinner in January, you know, because we do the dinners, could do it at the dinner.
Sure.
And even this, yeah, but I'm with Sandy. I
No, I
think they
like-
all
I
need
like
to
that.
at least bring the big bullet points.
Right.
I just don't want to get into micromanaging the work plan and spending an entire meeting, you know, going over something, so, because it could very easily
More-
turn into that, so,
We need to definitely compartmentalize the.
yeah, it could easily
So
eat
we
up an
can't
entire
say,
meeting, so.
if we choose not to do this, we can't then say, oh, you didn't have that on your work plan, when in fact they thought they did in this particular item, but we
Right,
didn't
which,
interpret it.
which is
so.
why, you know, my point is, it's incumbent upon each of us, we get the packet, we review it.
Mhm.
If we have a problem with something that's on the consent agenda, we each have the option to pull something, and then we can discuss it in the meeting.
Mhm.
If we don't, that's the purpose of a consent agenda. We're all on the same page, we don't have a problem with it, and it goes through, and it makes the meeting more
You mean, you're
efficient.
throwing this back at us to do our review?
I'm not sure we're always on the same page, because
that what
what
you
they
heard?
write and what
Yeah,
we
it's,
read are not always the same thing.
Well, the other thing that would happen last year, or maybe 2 years ago, is that there was, not last year, but 2 years ago, there was an overemphasis on a particular committee, which was inappropriate too. You know, one committee, they had to go through line by line by line by line, everything that they were proposing.
I didn't think it was incorrect, actually, because the things on that particular committee, if we're talking about the same one, were very controversial.
Well, not controversial, they were very complex and detailed, which goes back to even like, you know, the contractor thing and stuff like that. But, and that's why this year they were on the consent agenda for each of us to look at them rather than to go through line by line on particular ones. And the liaisons were supposed to get them into some kind of order and, you know, into a box that kind of fit. But I'm okay with having to do a small presentation. That's another thing that the committee members should be willing to do. But we had problems because different committees have different levels of,
Liaisons?
not the
We'll see how-
liaison, but.
Levels of
huh?
detail.
Huh?
I say, we'll see how it goes. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up
Still being.
being quite inefficient, but that's okay.
So as homework,
Okay.
let's get our goals and bullet points to Matt and
Priority.
priorities.
Mhm.
Get those to Matt.
Objectives,
Quickly.
measurable.
Rita, did
action.
you hear 70 RFPs?
Well,
Well, who's got 70
it's
RFPs?
115, so you're gonna have your work cut out Thursday.
115
Wow.
RFPs for what?
Art.
Oh, great, love it.
Rita, October 5th meeting this week.
Why, October 5th? That's
Yeah,
not
a
the third,
subgroup.
fourth. Oh. I
It's
didn't know.
meeting.
Okay.
Didn't know about it.
Further.
Can't meet if I don't
All
know.
right, we're adjourned. Good meeting.